capitalism. All of the gains in automation, it goes to the owner class. All you have to do is have everyone be an owner, and now suddenly any gain in automation is a gain for everybody. If you grow just one thing, it may not grow as well as if it grows with another thing. A good example of that is called the Three Sisters method of farming.
There is definitely multi-apartment buildings or multi-families that do passive design.
$100 million that they gave to Joe Rogan that they would kind of be out if they breach contract. Is that a bigger number, or is 2 billion a bigger number?
I don't know,
It's a
Zach.
tough one. I
It's
know,
really hard.
and maybe
Yes.
comparing numbers is not Jeremy's strong suit. Gotta go kill a Jenny.
I still don't think you should kill her. I don't think it's a good idea.
It's a ghost, dude. Welcome back, everybody, to Bread Theory. Tonight on the stream, I have Dan Plaat of the Three Lefts Show. Once again, gonna talk about some local political organizing. How you doing tonight, Dan?
Okay. It's a nice muggy 90 degrees here in Albany.
Oh, 90 degrees, wow.
Well, we just had some rain, so it dropped significantly, but that was the high today. Let me know if the bird chirping or any other kind of noise, because I have my windows open, and I am in the back bedroom here. So let me know if it's audible, and I'll do something about it.
Oh, that's fine. Add some ambiance.
Otherwise, the heaviness from the past few months has passed. We'll see about how I move forward and how things develop, as well as my actual projects, which will weigh on my mind as I read this particular pamphlet. But as we've gone through this series, I'm reading about how to do things properly, while I'm in an organization that, to be blunt, is dysfunctional and only through force of will by particular people has any kind of progress to it, and is at the moment has a lacking of volunteers and energy and enthusiasm.
That's too bad.
But that can be changed. I think I keep putting things out of order. I keep thinking that I need to make things, improve things to a point, like say be able to upload new shows on the schedule of the radio station I help manage. And then it'll be worth doing the outreach, because I'd rather have things set up than do outreach. This is a similar back and forth that occurred. Well, let me finish the thought. That I don't want to recruit people and not have things for them to do, because the technical problem wasn't solved. But I can't wait until the technical problem is going to be solved, because there's no timeline on it. There is no way of knowing when it will be done. It could take a whole another year. It has been, and it will, another month or so, it will be a full year since basically we tried to switch our servers and found that the technical issue was that we turn it on, but if we turn it off, we lose everything. So if so we need to fix that. Wow. Otherwise, it's not worth switching to the new server. But we need to switch to a new server because there are all these glitches that occur because of the age of the server we're on. And the main issue is that the board, aka two old hippie people, a married couple, who are lawyers, so they're very litigiously minded, have a priority that is not a bad priority. They're not crazy for prioritizing the building that the station is in. The building had a lot of damage and needs to be renovated. So they put all of their energy into grant writing and trying to get the grant money to renovate the building, to make it a working arts center, which it currently is not, because of a lot of problems. It's not a modern building. It's an old Italian church. And with no air conditioning, heating system is kind of crap, and windows and all these things. It just needs to be a modernized building. And they've when I check in on them, they've been spending all their time trying to get part of the build back money that came to Albany, which is like $50 million. But it's got to be split up 20 ways, and they want to be one of those 20 ways. They tell me they're in the running, so they're in round 2 or 3. But the fact that there are these rounds, it's just,
Yeah.
I hate it. I
Maddening.
hate it. It's like
Yeah.
we have to ask and fight over it, and they have to spend weeks upon weeks of like writing filling out paperwork,
Yeah.
doing an
Yeah.
application, like they're asking for permission, but that
Sure.
is really what it is.
Yeah. Yeah.
Got to prove that you're actually going to use the money or whatever. And I get that, but the thing is, it's just all scarcity mindset.
Right.
But anyway, it means that they've not put the attention to the radio station that they ever should have, and this has been the case the whole time. At least as it, yeah, because yeah. So, but it's not like, in some ways I need them to be on board to like fix the technical issue, because it was their deprioritizing of the station that made the man who was running things well rage quit, and I had to fill his shoes, and I just didn't want to. And this basically there isn't the leadership. I'm not motivated to be the leadership, which is but I don't have the experience that my predecessor had, because he has like 30 years experience doing making community media. So anyway, how are you? How are you doing? Let me.
I'm doing pretty well. It's the busy season for landscaping, so I've been doing just nonstop design
Getting
work
in
and
a lot.
proposals, and
It's got to get in the ground, man. Right?
gotta get in the ground. Yeah, yeah. So, but it's been exciting. There's been a lot of different things I've gotten to do. I've been doing these evening planting events at these kind of upscale residential buildings that are going up, where like I teach people how to arrange a living flower pot and stuff like that. And yeah, it's been good. Been getting good contacts out there, things like that.
Yes.
So.
So people can stop making those cringy jokes about how they kill their plants or what.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Don't know.
That's
I
right.
water them, and what else is there to do?
Yeah.
Which has happened to me as well, but at least I didn't do it with things I cared about.
Oh yeah.
I
still
did
do
have
stuff
basil.
plants too.
I did have basil growing the whole time.
That's good.
Last year. So, next part. I don't know if I need to preface this or do an update, because I don't know how much party work I'm going to be doing this year. I mean,
Okay.
we're wrapping up petitioning, and I did some of that. Wasn't, as I explained earlier in previous parts, didn't have my heart in it, but also because of personal issues as well.
For sure.
And just the station, I want the station to actually be successful. And it's not in, it's almost in zombie mode right now, because it's automated, so that it's on the air, it's working. It is, it's just the constant refrain is people don't know about it, right? Because the proper outreach hasn't been done, and the outreach has only been limited to tabling. It needs to be
Oh yeah.
flyers on every post. There needs to be a campaign, right?
Absolutely.
We've not had a full campaign. Why? Because any volunteers involved with the station have to put in all their work in maintaining it, or what have you, because it had to be done manually, or there's other bullshit involved. Now it's for the most part automated, unless something goes wrong, which happens because of the lack of switching.
The old
It's on an old
tech.
server.
Yeah.
So it's just a bunch of binds, a Gordian knot. And the thing is, we can get new energy, especially people who are volunteers for the station, but they're not doing a show per se. That's usually how you get people involved, right? If you do a show, be on the radio. But
Right.
the people doing the shows, that's like a part-time job. They're already putting in 5 hours a week. Why would I want? I don't want to ask for more from them, but or is because they are not able to give more time. That's on your end. Okay.
Oh yeah. The side.
So-
That's my side.
So the next part 6, there will be one more after this, and it's the political leaders' problems. Part 6. Now, it's actually more about the day-to-day running of the organization, so or the general running of an organization. So it's actually pretty potent, and as well, again, overlaps with how to run a campaign and how to. So there's stuff that repeats, but it's otherwise very useful to reiterate. And there's some lines in here that I'm going to stress. But first, a quote. Yes. Both political parties are in constant need of capable leaders on all levels. Here are some of the qualities you need to be an effective political leader. You'll have to have patience and determination, because successful political action is the result of day to day work throughout the year. You must have courage to fight for your own convictions within your party. You may have to accept occasional defeats, but you must have the foresight to look beyond the immediate election and measure candidates and policies by future problems. And needless to say, you've got to like people. A good politician is a good neighbor. And needless to say, you've got to like people. Sorry, I said that. Last, you must get new members for your party from among your friends and neighbors. I could think of it. There's always a skepticism about party or organization building because it kind of feels like you're trying to do an MLM. Right? Like
Yeah,
there's this,
yeah, right.
even though it's not a scam, it's a real project.
Uh-huh.
Or maybe because like there's a risk of failure or risk that the results may vary, that it's like you need to scam people into it, which is always something that kind of keeps me away. And why community projects are always such a winner, because with that, it's like, no, we will be able to do this. There will not be some reason why it falls apart at the last minute, though that can still happen. When it comes to, say, community garden, there usually isn't. It's not a high risk ask to say, would you like to be involved with that?
Right.
Again, when I pitch the station, although I can be full throated in my elevator pitch for the Green Party, giving the elevator pitch for the station is very easy. I know I can get people on the air, and we do reach people, and we have had some kind of effect, just not a wide one where everyone knows we exist. But everyone would like to know that we exist. They do actually want to hear about us.
Mhm.
Um, my problem is I got to cut myself off before I start rambling all the problems we have, because it's a bad habit of like, well, I want to temper people's what do you call it, their expectations, so that like when I tell them, when they show up to a meeting or something, and then I start saying we can't do that and that needs to be fixed, they don't get discouraged. I want to tell them now, so it's like, be aware, we got these issues, but there's also stuff that can be done now. Try to balance it, but sometimes you want to leave that out, which
Yeah.
I think it's. I did it yesterday, yes, basically, but it was with someone who I was already familiar with. I know she's already an activist type person. She's aware of these kind of problems, so I felt comfortable talking about it with her.
Sure.
So anyway, remember always, politics is the means of keeping our American way of self-government by bringing people, the opinions and wishes of people into a unity that becomes a program of the people, for the people, and most important, by the people. Vice President Richard M. Nixon.
Plot twist there.
I kept that away from you. Now, I want to point out, this is about leadership. Now, leadership can, in fact, refer to kind of anybody. Now, this pamphlet is, of course, taking on the hierarchical mind, frame of mind, as most society does. But in Occupy, we had the dual concepts that were kind of at odds with each other, of that were leaderless, meaning we don't have any leader, meaning we don't have any one authority to appeal to. Well, that's the downside. You don't have an authority to appeal to if there's a
Right.
conflict that needs resolving.
There's no final arbiter.
Um, yeah. And there's no, so you don't get any closures unless you can't have justice. So that's kind of why you need an authority. It just needs to be a justified one, which is the anarchism that I would subscribe to. But then we're not leaderless, we're leaderful. We have many leaders. In fact, we can all be leaders
that's a
if
good
we're all
way to put it,
willing
yeah.
to take on responsibility.
Absolutely.
Which is something that most people aren't familiar with, because in our society, hierarchical as it is, it does not, it prides itself almost in not giving
Right.
people responsibility,
Right.
or keeping it away from people because they will screw it up.
Mm-hmm.
Thus is the cynical or the jaded mindset. So I don't repeat myself too often while I'm reading this. what do you call it when you have pet peeves? Pet peeves of mine are people who become jaded after failing once, like, and they failed because they only stuck at it for 6 months or something. Like,
Sure.
I started a project, wasn't going well after 6 months. Sometimes even this applied to Occupy. Like, it's been 2 months. Why haven't we overthrown the government yet? Or why haven't we made change? Or why
Wow.
haven't the Democrats, I don't know, passed a wealth tax or something? And they get discouraged and they basically leave. Or I've met anarchists who are jaded because they did a housing collective where too many of the members were potheads that didn't do any chores, and now they're like, yeah, I'm kind of an anarchist, but I'm not going to do anything. I'm not going to do any other kinds of projects again, or not for a
That's sad
long
to see.
while, or I'm not doing that anymore. I have to get a real job and participate in normalcy. Sell insurance. And okay, so that's it so far. More will come up later.
Okay.
The political leader. A political leader is the person to whom the members of a political party have delegated responsibility for managing its affairs. So delegation, okay, is a type of authority you've delegated to it.
Right.
Political leaders exist at every level of a party org. In this pamphlet, however, the term is applied to a county central committee chairman, city leader, town leader, ward chairman, or the like. In some areas, these political leaders are referred to as chairmen. They could be also in the pirate party, they're called captains, like the captains of a ship, which in their ideology or their definition is not the person who is the authority, but simply the facilitator of people's desires. The crew makes the plan, the captain coordinates the plan.
Sure.
And so in my head, my anarcho-communist or social ecology head, I replace leader with coordinator, or instead
Seems
of
reasonable.
commander with a coordinator. In some areas, these political leaders, individuals may assume political leadership, be elected, or be appointed. The power of the leader is to be derived from a constitution, bylaws, or some other unwritten agreement or tradition. Basically, however, the leader keeps his leadership and derives their authority from the loyalty of those who support him. Basically, means is what matters, not the text. You can have a written agreement, constitution, but what are the material, means of having power?
Mm-hmm.
The real political leader may or may not hold a public office. He may not even have a title, being rather a private citizen with no official position, like Robert Moses. Where the real leader is necessary for him to work through an officially designated party leader for purposes or simplification. Therefore, this pamphlet describes the problems of any kind of leader in terms of an officially designated one. This is the way they're talking about it. So the position, I think I can skip this one. If many of their decisions are wrong or if they are indecisive, the party deteriorates and they are likely to be replaced. The position is different from that of a chief executive of a company in that their subordinates and their board of directors are usually the same people. Management problems become more difficult when the chief executive must woo the support of his employees in addition to organizing them and directing their efforts. Well, it is more democratic than a business, which is why I'm sort of glad it's not saying your party needs to be run like a business. Though, there will be quotes and things in this pamphlet that are like, people don't seem to understand party organizing because, well, they see it as completely needs to be different than in running a business. But at the same time, they're mad it's not run like a business because that's what they're familiar with. Sort of like how Democracy at Work talks about things where we have a dictatorship in businesses, but we don't want it in our politics apparently, but many people act like that's normal too.
Right.
Or rather, we want democracy in our politics and fairness and accountability, but we do not in our economy. So leadership strength varies with individuals as well as with position. In some areas, for example, a successful established city leader may dominate a county one. In others, a county leader may be able to replace a well established city one if they deem it necessary. Political leadership status, in short, can be tedious or tenuous or unassailable, depending on the personality and on the ability of the person in question. So, what are their functions? Um, Within the limitation described above, a political leader must, like a chief executive in a business, so then it switches gears and says actually they are like a business leader. They manage the affairs of their party organization unit. They're responsible for planning and decision making in their area. They must maintain a good name for their company, in this case, their party in the community. So maintain good PR. They're expected to have a good vote producing record, and the next higher leader rates him on their ability to perform. Now, something that this mentioned, this line here, throughout these pamphlets, they've been kind of been talking about because it's from a chamber of commerce of the U.S. They talk about votes as if you can like that's a replacement for like in the minds like as profit. That votes are the product of political organizing. It's like
I see.
you're producing it with an organization. You need
Product is the vote.
employees
Yeah,
and
yeah.
you need workforce to produce something, right? You need labor.
Yeah.
A political organization requires for a political product, which is measured in the same way profit and value is measured in dollars, is measured in votes. So there's either a one-to-one comparison with like dollars to votes and what they mean again. Like a vote is like a commodity. Commodity
Right.
is something that can be commoditized. Um, but similar to capitalism and the problems we have with it is that it seems like an end in itself. What do you do once you have profit? What do you do once you have the votes? What do you like? It's basically in business you use profit to get more profit. Do you,
Right.
or is it a question of reinvesting in your business, aka the organization,
Right.
giving yourself a fatter paycheck,
Mm-hmm.
or what? Yeah.
That's a good question. Yeah. What do you?
So that is, of course, not discussed in this booklet, these booklets at all.
Mm.
I mean, it's keeping it almost apolitical in that way, especially if you talk about politics like you're just acting in a marketplace of ideas,
Right.
marketplace of where people's opinions but it's so much more messier and complicated than that because people are
For sure.
living, breathing, conscious beings. They're not bananas or well the
Right.
rolls of linen,
Right.
rolls
Yeah.
of linen for coats.
Uh-huh.
Okay. They must handle patronage and advise their party's office holders on political matters. So enforce the party line. They must build an organization of salesmen. The precinct leaders train them to sell the party to the candidates and its candidates. So candidates themselves are not actually always leaders, like because they're people pleasers. They're people who are they're the salesmen. They're the front men. They're not the people
Right.
who run things. They're not the people who are the producing. They're just part of it. The candidates, the office holders, they're they're middlemen, and that is the way to kind of think about political representation. That they're always middlemen for the actual kind of things that are running things, whether it be the ruling class or party organization. Um, they rate their subordinates and reward good performance in whatever way they can, and if necessary, get rid of dead wood.
Mm.
Their judgment is most important in selecting candidates for public office, the representatives of the party in the eyes of voters. A party is judged largely on the quality of its candidates. They must obtain financial support for campaigns and for maintaining their organization. In short, They have large responsibilities. The limitations on their freedom of action are considerable. Like most of their workers, usually an unpaid volunteer.
Mm.
That seems counter to what these have been talking about. But
Yeah, yeah.
um, any reactions so far?
Um, let's see. I don't think we had any comments specifically about it. We had some people in chat, so welcome Ali, welcome Shanika. Glad to have you. Um, yeah, no specific comments on the text so far, but
No,
yeah,
from you.
makes sense. Pretty. Oh, for me. Okay. Um, no, it's pretty straightforward so
Just
far.
want to give my voice a break.
Sure, no problem. Um, yeah. Sorry,
Okay.
I can't be a more.
All right, no worries. Characteristics. Let's just list them out. They need courage. Political leader must show determination in carrying out the program and will of their organization. This does not mean heavy-handed tactics or a bull in the china shop approach. We can dispense of that. Bulls are actually very graceful, and they actually would knock things over, as that
Okay.
MythBuster
Thank you.
showed. It doesn't mean a willingness to stand up and be counted when it may not be popular to do so.
Okay.
Decision-making ability. This will be countered to other things mentioned, of course. Always contradictions. But decision-making ability, the ability to make the right decisions, is the acid test of a political leader. Their ability is closely related to their courage, intelligence, and experience, which they list off as well. But of course, how do you judge things as being the right decision or not? Well, does it get votes? Does it win?
Yeah, yeah. Does it have the right outcome?
There is an outcome, and in too many activist circles, there is too much of a excuse making of like justifying why they don't produce results, or like saying slingshot. Yeah, we failed to stop the pipeline, but we did learn some lessons. Always learning lessons, but
Yeah.
rarely results. Getting
Right.
results, and it's like, well, that's kind of why we're always like in the muck.
Yeah,
My
it is easy to throw out that excuse since most of the population already is not necessarily on our side or aware of our side. So it's pretty easy to just be like,
yeah,
yep, it's all their fault.
it's also a constant. Let's see. I'm thinking about how we don't have more results, but we also we're always learning lessons because we still don't seem to know what works.
Mm-hmm.
Even though, as you and I have been doing, we read about what did work, what was successful.
Right.
And I think there is a block when it comes to activists, that whatever political tendency they are, that they still have a middle-class bourgeois mindset that keeps them from being able to do the things that the leaders we admire or did. To be able to identify the successes, because as far as pure ideology in America is concerned, there are no socialist successes. And so, especially if you're a certain type of anarchist or tank or ML, though that's the difference, really. To me, an ML recognizes that there have been socialist successes. Not complete successes, of course, but they're more successful than Catalonia, Spain.
Sure.
At least as far as how long they lasted, or their effects, or their actual results. I think at the end of the day, I think Cuba is the best kind of example of
That's what I feel too.
the revolution that did not make things worse in the long run.
Right.
I hate but can you imagine? And you probably have heard that people would say the Haitian Revolution didn't help Haitians. They're worse than ever, right? Because of colonialism and U.S. meddling and everything. But it's like, what did it change? They're still practically enslaved or whatever. Or the French Revolution. And it's because if there's any kind of revolt and there's a terror that's like, whether it's short or longer, but usually it's called a terror because it was temporary. um, which is sort of a Machiavellian thing. You get all the bad stuff out of the way first, and then you can actually spend the rest of your life doing things that actually make you popular, um, which is Machiavelli's in The Prince.
Uh-huh.
Uh, um, and then you die a hero, like Castro. But let's see. So next is trustworthy. In business, people rely on written contracts. In politics, a man's word is their bond. A politician is slow to give their word. Often they must be pinned down as to their exact meaning, but a verbal agreement is honored. A politician who does not keep their word becomes known as unreliable and loses support. Well, it depends on whose support matters. In
Right.
our context, it is the ruling class or upper middle class, just bourgeois capitalists
Right.
that are like, as long as they're
As long as they
popular
still
with
care.
them
Yeah.
and they're trustworthy with them, and that's in the back room. That's at the fundraising dinner, on
Hmm.
TV or in interviews. Yeah, of course, no average voter trusts any politician, and yet somehow they're not unelected or even
Funny how that
unelected.
works.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, funny how that works and how
Funny
people
how
aren't
that
like,
works.
well, maybe it's the whole political system that's,
Right.
and not
Right.
just my representative or Congress. Maybe we need to change all that. Um, but then they're really, really jaded about doing wholesale change of any kind
Oh,
because
of
in the
course.
back of their mind, they would lose out somehow.
Hmm.
Because
You'd have to give up too
to
much.
change, well, I mean, it's more dangerous to want to change things, do radical change.
Right.
Because, like I said, um, pure ideology is that radical change is always bad. It
Right.
never improved anything ever, which is total bullshit. And why would
Absolutely
you
bullshit. Yeah.
constantly re-educate people? I think if we get any kind of troll person, I think we should just throw "lies my teacher told me" as maybe a starting text. It's
Okay.
short, it's breezy, it's simple. It kind of gets to the heart of like where the beginning of their preconceptions may have started if it wasn't from their parents or their upbringing. But
Sure.
like there's lies my teacher told me, which was written in the 80s, early like
Yeah, I've heard
the
of that
80s.
book.
But as far as maybe red states go, I don't think any of that curriculum has ever changed. I know in my state or some blue states, yeah, we don't hold up Christopher Columbus as this great hero anymore. Um, but I think triangle trade routes and whatever, it's maybe there's probably more of a conversation Zinn has had in effect. Um, as you're reading people's history of the U.S.
Yeah.
But that's more advanced than lines my teacher told me, which is just the introduction of like
Introduction, all
here are
that
the
stuff.
basic things that were like you were lied
Very
about.
cool. Yep.
That basically get to that undergird the presuppositions about American exceptionalism and the things that make up pure ideology. Because we keep taking this top down approach of like let's start with our academic proof and logic,
Mm-hmm.
when it's like that's not how people were
It's
convinced
not
of
how
it.
people think. Yeah.
Not how they were convinced of anything.
Right.
Um, the other thing that comes to mind is I just was watching a video about Jon Stewart's
Mm-hmm.
problem with Jon Stewart,
Yeah. Yeah.
and how um, he has his um, his basic cynical approach to humanity that or the American middle class white capitalist person is a stand-in for all of humanity,
Mm.
and no one else is actually different or whatever. It's like we're inherently selfish and we're inherently going to do the um, tragedy of the commons. But that's scarcity capitalism. That's
Right.
humanity scarcity
Yeah. He
capitalism,
definitely
and he
cannot get
doesn't understand that at
beyond that.
all. You had an activist point this out to him,
Mm-hmm.
and he was like, "Huh, I don't know if I did agree with that." Um, but when it comes down in this climate change episode, he would keep repeating that there's this, retraining that has to occur to get people to that people need to think differently about these things, whether they be in business or whatever. And when it comes to anyone who talks like that, I haven't had too many opportunities to test this, but I would like to test. Just stopping the conversation and just say, don't worry about anyone else.
Mm-hmm.
Are you willing to change?
Hmm.
Or are you willing, or rather to make it more specific, are you willing to consider being a post-capitalist?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Whether or not, like, because when it comes down to it, it's the Tina defense of there's no alternative. Capitalism is like either inherently natural or just something that's not going to go away. There are even radical
Typically.
political actors who still talk like this.
Oh yes.
But are you willing to act like you want to end capitalism?
Mm-hmm.
And if you're not, then the conversation's over. Then I guess we just need to work on things we agree on. We're not going to be we're in disagreement overall about where we're going and where we need to go. So we're not going to be in the same party. We're not going to be in the same org, but we can collaborate, whatever.
Yeah, I like that.
And if the answer is yes, then let's start there. You're willing to put on the post-capitalism hat. No, not anti. Let's say you're not anti-capitalist, but you want to move beyond capitalism. That's something a lot of SOC Dems could be moved on. I was just having this kind of conversation with a SOC Dem who he just got out of college. He works in the state Senate now as a researcher. And he's very much a climate activist. He was organizing things during his college years. He's well experienced. Actually, probably he's done a lot, and even it always feels like more than me. But let's say we're similar. And instead of arguing with him on every point about how capitalism is the problem, I simply outlaid we want to make the Green Party open to being for anyone who's post-capitalist. And he actually had a very positive reaction to that. It's like, oh, you know what, you haven't lost it. And that's, I think, where we can go with a lot of centrist or Jon Stewart types of people.
Yeah.
So that's quite a digression there, but I had to get.
No, that's important. Yeah, that's a good way to deal with people that are just swimming in that capitalist realism.
Or everybody else is, or people with a cynical mindset, or jaded that everyone else is the problem. What about you?
Mm-hmm.
Are you the problem, or are you just the thing with jaded and cynicism, which is, of course is just the mind killer, is killing the Reagan in your head. Is that they've given up. They haven't really given up on everyone else. They've actually given up on themselves. Or everybody, which includes themselves. And it's you have to help them believe in themselves or believe that they could have an impact. And of course, when I'm talking with someone cynical and it's always the people who are 10 years younger than me. Not always, but I mean, they vary in age. But if I am talking to someone who's just starting out, they just got out of college or they're in college and they're already jaded, I'm you haven't even started yet, man.
Yeah.
You haven't had an impact. Have you tried?
Mm-hmm.
Could I help you try? And I have to build that trust and that relationship. So it's not one and done, as we've discussed during previous parts of this.
Mm-hmm.
So next, this is a long list actually. So I'm just going to say it. Patience, basically all the virtues: patience, adaptability, direction, persuasion. I'll read this out. Political leadership differs somewhat from leadership in other orgs. Lines of authority are more fluid. Normal management practices are not followed, nor necessarily expected. Authority can pass from one person to another without a formal notice. And I think there's a problem where nonprofits and other orgs attempt to have a line of authority, and that's where they get they become static, or where they get stuck and become ineffective. Accordingly, a broad sense of direction, maximum persuasive ability, willingness to cooperate, and the ability to cope with frustration are qualities political leaders need in more generous measure than leaders in other types of orgs. They are important to success in any position of political power. Again, these are kind of more platitudes. It's has this really been the case? If you actually enter some of these smoke-filled rooms, you have your type who's just fucking pissed all the time, or they get what they want by screaming at everybody else.
Yeah.
Like Madison Cawthorn, exiting the office, and he's drenched in his own tears. Oh
Oh.
yeah, that was obviously the leadership there was very patient with him. Um, but accordingly, sensitivity to trends, thick skin, in quotes, to be
Yeah.
big enough to look past barbs and criticisms. Just basically maturity. The word is maturity that you're looking for. Not
Sure.
used often enough in conversations of any type, but maturity is a kind of a word I'd like to see used more often. They were not mature; they were
I like
immature.
it. Uh huh.
Of course, I guess it's relative. What do you mean mature? Having virtues, I guess. Also, a sense of humor, level-headed, have initiative, experience, especially at the precinct level. Many leaders retain their precinct leadership even though they hold much higher party posts. Without the basic background acquired by precinct experience, higher levels, or an understanding of how votes are actually gotten, or the problems precinct leaders face in getting them, as a precinct leader, a politician learns to be sensitive to what people are thinking, to discriminate between inconsequential brush fire issues that will go out harmlessly and forest fire issues that require major attention. Okay. I didn't know brush fires go out on their own. Like the
I mean,
company
I guess they
president
do
who,
eventually.
well, I guess they burn faster and
Oh
shorter, and
yeah. Okay.
they don't spread as far. Like the company president who periodically spends time in the plant to learn the real problems. Yes, yes. Um, the days on the road with salesmen to find out how the product is selling. Oh yes, that totally happened. But otherwise, you make ivory tower mistakes. Even national chairmen who have opinion polls and advertising agencies to assist them in feeling the pulse of the people have retained their precinct leaderships back home. And he names some people we have never heard of.
Okay.
Their names are Leonard Hall, James Farley, and Meade Alcorn. Wow, I'm so impressed.
Mead Alcorn. There's a name you don't hear.
Yeah, name your kid Meade.
Me.
So the next section is about recruiting and training workers. Because unlike a capitalist, you don't have the threat of starvation or homelessness to retain your workforce.
Right. Got to
Uh,
motivate in other ways.
right. So the political organization carefully selects its personnel, both paid and unpaid. While a political organization should never be in the position of turning down volunteers, one of the basic fallacies in recruiting workers for political orgs is the idea that care and judgment are not required in selecting for positions of responsibility. So to have a list of things where it's like it's if they screw up or they flake, it's not the end of the world or it's not going to cost you results. But I feel like if that happens enough, if everyone flakes out on you, nothing happens. So
Right. Absolutely.
there's some like I don't know what to do
No.
about this
Yeah.
yet. Experienced political leaders know they must review, judge, and finally hire personnel with the same care required in running a corporation. Which is why it's like, well, you need to run a business before you can run for government. So here are some sources of political workers, as mentioned in previous sections, pamphlets. There's the clubs, political clubs, or any kind of club really, but any kind of social group. Like I just had good conversations after,
Oh, cool.
and I was able to get some petition signatures too. As a rule, people who stand out as organizers in any community activities, such as charity drives, church work, service clubs, veteran groups, are good potential material for political assignments. I have found that, as we've discussed before, going to commercialist or consumerist type of activities and clubs does not seem to be a good place for recruiting or political work. Though I need to check in with a guy who was asking for input because he was going to go petition at a con,
Okay.
an anime con. And I think he was like asking for tips on like what kind of costume could I throw together quickly,
Well.
or should I worry about being in cosplay,
Mm,
or something like that. And we were just having some fun with
yeah.
during that.
But so do you think that the reason that it's hard to organize at these places is just because people's brains are not in that mode to receive information? They're going to whatever convention it is, and then here you are talking about something completely different. That just throws them off, or what do you think it is?
Um, it's like you need polling, post or like of general public polling of like when you're at the mall or if you go to Jazz Fest
Hmm.
or when you, I mean, it's possible to petition or to do political canvassing at big public events. It's probably, it's where you should go to do those things. Like when we were petitioning at Tulip Festival, like I was talking about last time.
Yeah.
Um, I didn't get as many petitions as I wanted, but I was making some mistakes, mostly on purpose, because again, I wanted to just kind of have some. If someone engaged with me, I just kept talking to them. 10 minutes.
Yeah.
You're not supposed to because you're not getting
I
much
know. Yeah.
answers. But like, you
Plenty
know
of
what?
numbers.
I feel like having a 10-minute conversation with a guy will be set him up for the next, thing more than just signing a petition. It's a
Yeah.
really quick and easy way of engaging people, but it's also like the lightest.
It
It's
doesn't take
even
that
more
long
so
to.
when it comes to just results come in the
Yeah.
form of petition signatures. But in getting the most, you're not actually organizing. You're just producing
Right.
results.
Right.
Like I bumped into one of the petitioners for Larry Sharp, the Libertarian Party New York candidate, and he told me he had like 4 times as many sheets as me that he like he was already in like he got how many sheets did he say he got? I only filled out like 3 or 4, and he had like 8, meaning
Wow.
um or whatever. He was going gangbusters, and we were talking, and we just briefly talked about the kind of question you ask. Did I cover this with you last time? I think I did.
I don't remember this particular anecdote. So
Okay, I was
if you're
talking.
repeating yourself,
I
it'll still
bet
be
I
useful.
believe I did, but um, we talked about the questions you ask.
Mm.
We got some success by asking as a like we were kicked off the ballot by Coma. Would you like to help us get back on?
Oh, I do recall you
You do
saying this
recall,
before,
yes.
but yeah. But
He was
continue
framing
again.
it as, "Will you help me get an independent third-party candidate on the ballot?" He wouldn't say who or what party because that can turn people off. It's partisan. It makes it a partisan question, matter of support or not. People will
Mm.
make excuses to not sign, but if you just make it, but of course, I've like, how would that work? Because as soon as they like sign, like they actually, I get their attention, they stop, but then they will ask. Usually, maybe half the time they will ask. So I
Mm.
guess you still get more at the end of the day for the people who just don't care, don't ask the follow-up question themselves of who are you running? What party is this? Um, if it's just a matter of canvassing people for the sake of it, almost, it's like you don't care if they get educated. You put that aside for getting signatures. So what am I? So this is a digression from commercial events, like going to cons or flyering or flying for a candidate outside of a Comic Con.
Mm.
People are in a commercial, like a mindset of shopping, of I'm here to have fun. I don't want the
Right.
outside world. I don't want to think about politics or parties or they don't think about it at all. So that's probably why they don't stop anyway. Like the meme from not VentureCon, regular show, where like they're flyering and the guy like limbos. You know that one? No. Okay.
No.
Um, you can have good engagements. It's not like it never happens whatsoever. But maybe it's just the mindset of like if I'm at a Comic Con or something, like I don't want to be politically engaged or something. It takes time out of talking about anime,
Right.
um, or whatever it is, comics, whatever. But obviously, when you are a political worker and you believe in what you're doing and the cause is in fact fucking important because the world is fucking at stake, you need to get in people's face and like, hey guys, you need to care about this. The Marvel media is feels good, but everything sucks, and it's just a distraction from the toil of your life. Maybe we could do something about that together, like the
That's a
Avengers,
good lead-in. Yeah.
or
Yeah.
even though the Avengers is the anti-union, really.
Oh yeah.
Um, It's always funny how, like in media, or movies, that rebellions or things kind of like people just show up in mass, like in V for Vendetta. People just get a call and they show up, and then the thing happens. The government's overturned. In the real world, that actually does happen at times, like, at least politically speaking. Like in Argentina, where you just had everyone showing up multiple for weeks. In Egypt, the
Mm-hmm.
spring. But I mean, it
Yeah,
didn't
the
change the
Tahrir
base
Square.
conditions. So did you really change things? Um, but that's what, like, but let's say, it doesn't show the organizing that happens, right? It doesn't show that these things had to be organized. Everything good, or even in a movie, had to be organized. And it would just be boring to show the organizing happening.
Yeah, that would not make for good cinema.
But I have to wonder what, like, maybe make some anti-media and make a movie about an organizer organizing and actually show all the steps and then the victory at the end that feels good.
Yeah.
And the struggles and the conflict is the organizing. I feel like we need that. We need to see that. And it could be. I think it could be written in a way that's fun. It'd be a writing challenge.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, okay. So many sidetracks. Sources of political workers. So yeah, I was going through. Yeah, so that's what got me up. So before approaching anyone who is already active in politics to join their team, the leader will check with the top person in the org from which he is recruiting for several reasons. So, like, check with those above you, which isn't usually. It's funny. It's like, well, I thought the point of being fluid, that a political org is more fluid than a corporation. You don't have to check up the line.
Right.
But
Yeah.
as far as checking with, say, the other people you're coordinating with or your committee, it is a matter of courtesy to let people in the loop. It would be considered politically inept if they didn't, and it might be accused of pirating, as in, like, I'm recruiting, I guess, people to help me, not the party or the org.
Oh.
And the leader or the person above you or beside you might receive valuable information about the person they're considering. I want to alliterate that, instead of the structure of the hierarchy, we can put all of this advice in the form of the sociocracy, where you have a circle. And so it's like, you might be in each circle should have someone who's coordinating things, a chairperson.
Mm-hmm.
And that person, that leader in this one circle, will then connect with an inner circle. Like not a wheel with spokes, but it's like teardrops, connecting in the middle, so to speak.
Okay.
Maybe you could do a stream on sociocracy, and we could
Sociocracy.
maybe we do
Yeah.
that next. Now we talked about how to organize in the past. We can talk about organizing for the future.
Yeah,
How
absolutely.
to do
I'm
now.
all for that.
Checking references. Public officials and other political leaders may furnish helpful information about an individual who is being considered for work. Coworkers can indicate if the person is well liked. People who can't get along with others are poor risks in politics, no matter how talented they are. I think this comes up with, to me, this our city government has many task forces or committees or advisory committees,
Mm-hmm.
and to join any of them, you basically need permission from the city. You need to submit, like, a letter of interest, resume. Your resume. I hate that the resume is, like, in every call for applicants for any public participation. They want your resume. Like, what's my fucking job history have to do with? But that's the thing. They're checking references. They want you to be qualified, to have minimum experience in order to participate in a committee, which really sucks because it just locks so many people out who aren't professionals. You have to be like, there's advisory committee that's going to be formed for pot policy. They're not going to have any power, but they're going to advise the council on the rules for dispensaries or the recreational businesses for pot. And
Mm-hmm.
again, you have to submit your resume. It's like, You have to like either be in the it means they're basically saying you either have to be in the pot business already or some kind of community leader. Like we don't it can't be Joe Schmo, which is what I mean when you ask for a resume, it's like that's what you're basically saying. We don't want a rando, or we're not going to pick a rando. You need an in, you need a recommendation. It's like any other job, but it's unpaid labor in a political committee that doesn't even have power or responsibility, but you
Hmm.
still get a means test. Basically, I hate that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
That sucks.
so many reasons for doing it, but they're all bourgeois reasons, not democracy reasons.
Right.
Um,
Gatekeeping reasons.
but I don't know. I think I put in my application for the sustainability committee and
Okay.
wasn't didn't get any callback or whatever. It was like it felt
Hmm.
like applying for a job, and that was just
Yeah.
the worst
That
thing.
sucks.
Like I'm not going to do this again because you didn't even like check to say, oh, thanks for your interest, or
Yeah.
like
Right.
they ghosted just like any other boss would. I'm
Oh.
like, why wasn't I chosen? It's not like I've been an activist. I have credibility.
Right.
I'm educated in these issues. Oh, but I don't own a gardening business or something, or I'm not
Um.
I'm not the lead. I'm not a well, I'm not Scott Kellogg of the Radix Center, who's been doing a community garden and community garden network for 10 years.
Mm,
I'm not that community leader, but that's who they want. Someone who already has a lot on their plate and a lot of responsibility. They get more
yeah.
titles, not where you start. And I guess the starting position is in those orgs, those community orgs, the
Yeah.
nonprofits. And once you've gotten cred there and you have a title there, then you're credible enough to join a city committee on something. So it's like knowing where the entry position is. But of course, the thing and we're probably all mad about is just that the lack of participation because it's still a very limited amount of spots in that hierarchy. The
Yeah. Absolutely.
nonprofits are only hiring so often, so many people for paid positions with titles. Um, and I think you get those positions by volunteering a shitload. So you have to do all this unpaid internship bullshit
Right. Oh.
to basically get
Same.
a paid job for historic Albany. And then once you're in
Yep.
historic Albany long enough, I'm going into rant mode now. But once you're in historic Albany, then you can be on the historic preservation committee for the city. And then once you're on that long enough, then maybe you have credibility to be a party committee person and then run for council. But you have to go through all these goddamn intermediate steps.
Ah, it's
And
ridiculous.
it's like this is how it works, and it's like, but it's not spelled out.
Yep.
It's not part of
Yeah.
any formal rules or education. Um, it's yeah, I gotta find a shorter way of articulating that to complain
It's
about it.
it's the
To have
same
it,
sort of gate.
yeah,
It's like the same sort of
just
gatekeeping that
gatekeeping,
happens
gatekeeping for
in
professionalization. Yeah,
right. Yeah. But then you see
um,
in any large corporation, like you have to do an unpaid internship for a year, and like the only people that are able to do that have to be financially independent or supported by someone else,
I think my
like their
quandary
family.
is my quandary is like how to argue positively for deprofessionalizing political work. Because the underlying bourgeois values is that people who are qualified, who can do a good job, should be
Uh-huh.
handling these things. If you're on a
Right.
sustainability committee, you need to be able to, um, you have to already be doing that work. If you're going to run for office, you already have to be an organizer. You can't just start and do it. Just like how you have all these fascists running for school boards to take their schools back from mass and CRT, but then once like maybe two out of like 20 are elected to like one of them is elected onto the board, and they don't know what the fuck to do now.
Hmm.
They're like, what's next? And it's like, well, I know that I'm going to be outnumbered and I won't actually be able to do anything, but at least I'll be able to articulate my point of view in a public forum and waste
Got a
people's
seat
fucking
at
time.
seat at the table.
Yes. Um, and that's like, the thrills of democracy that, oh, they didn't actually
Yeah.
have to be qualified. But they were able to win because it's an election where literally only 2,000 people vote, or
Yep.
it's just a luck of the
Yeah.
draw kind of thing because no one's really paying attention. Um, So if you get your Fox News watching network to vote for you, then that's enough.
There you go.
You didn't actually have to organize; you just needed mobilization.
Mm-hmm.
So, testing. In politics, people are generally assigned to less demanding jobs. This is what I was just talking about, before being moved on to greater responsibilities. This procedure is not prompted by doubts about an individual's ability, but springs from the need for learning political behavior step by step. Moreover, because voluntary workers receive no monetary compensation, the rewards for good work may take the form of impressive titles and increased responsibilities.
Mm-hmm.
I find that odd because I don't know what. Maybe it's a millennial Zoomer or pre-Boomer thing, but younger than Boomer. Responsibility doesn't seem to be a reward for most. It seems to be like a burden,
A burden. Yeah.
um, not something you actually want or seek out.
Sure.
But responsibility comes with power, so I guess that's what they mean. You get more power. That's the reward. More say, more autonomy. Autonomy is the reward. Um,
Wow.
But my
Yeah.
cause with certain like advisory boards for the city is that they don't have power. So why do I need to be means tested to join it? That's what I'm kind of. Or when I go into the when I watch their Zoom meeting, they're discussing little pet projects, or little like they're not making big policy for the city. It's not like they have a lot of power or responsibility over a lot of things at all. Um, the parking authority has more responsibility, and that's so I've decided to make that kind of my talking point when discussing problems with the city with people. Like we have a parking authority, we don't have a transportation department,
Mm-hmm.
meaning everything's just car centric.
I
We
mean,
we
yeah.
have we
Yeah.
have a part of city hall that's pseudo public, pseudo private, that is that manages the parking garages and whatever and parking, but not public transit because that's regional. But there's a
Yep.
lot of business. But when it comes to bike lanes, that's like we need state money for that. We can
Oh,
never,
really?
we
Even for
can't.
bike lanes?
Well, which
Jeez.
we're never spend local budget money on that. Give too much to the police. Or road repair. Road repair is pretty much county money. Um, yeah, I mean my block just got renovated streetwise.
Uh huh.
Um, but we lost our trees, and now I'm getting tons of water coming into my windows when it rains. The trees will block
Probably
a
not
lot
a
of the rain,
coincidence. Yeah.
and now it's like I got water that wells up through the window sashes. Now maybe there's a little crack that's open that I never noticed until now.
Mm-hmm.
It's just so
No.
hard to like get that close. These are old windows.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so testing is referred to giving people the tasks that are like not a big deal. Workers with long and faithful service may resent the promotion of a newcomer to a higher one. Rating workers. Both during the testing period and later, a successful leader finds it necessary to rate workers, particularly precinct leaders. The leader uses different methods to evaluate performance. Headquarters workers are not difficult to rate. The leader can observe who carries out their assignments. Shirkers become the subject of conversation, and the leader hears it. Those who do an outstanding job in publicity or so on are brought to their attention. Let's move on. In manning let's see. Just review performance, check in with people. Manning the precincts. Selecting the right people to man precincts is critical because elections are won there. Unless the party has every precinct adequately manned, it cannot turn out its core party voters or basically do anything. So that's why it's like to start there. Like a business, political organizations may have more personal problems in one area than another. Businesses may find it harder to get salesmen in some cities than in others. Similarly, experienced leaders have found that two types of precincts cause the most difficulty: the ones with high income and low income, extremes. And so
Hmm.
perhaps one of the problems is there's no middle income precinct anymore. People are either have wealth or they don't.
Yeah.
Um,
That's the truth.
so yeah, there was the middle class in the 50s. So there was a lot, and it's true. The neighborhoods that are more like, obviously the middle class is squeezed. um, and they kind of get reactionary because they think they're being squeezed from the top and the bottom somehow. Well, not somehow.
Hmm.
They're getting squeezed because their taxes, like the rich steal from them in all the ways that they might be aware of. The poor steal from them through taxes that go
They
to
get
public
funneled down to them.
assistance.
Ugh.
Yeah,
Yeah.
goes to
Okay.
public assistance. So they see that as the poor stealing from them as well. So when the middle
Jeez.
class hears rhetoric about them being squeezed, they actually think they're being squeezed from like bottom to top.
Both sides. Yeah.
Yeah, both sides. Which is why there's that with reactionary politics in a nutshell. Nutshell.
Mm-hmm.
Let's cover the problems. High income precincts. In the high income precincts, the residents are usually successful business owners, bourgeoisie, or
Yeah.
professional, petite bourgeoisie. They are busy. They have responsibility. They have responsible jobs and are accustomed to working. Well, they have jobs with autonomy and power and high information, and are accustomed to working with a staff that handles details. Such people generally prefer to serve the party with their checkbook, if at all. They will not become active in precinct work unless they thoroughly understand its importance, or because they don't have to do it; they can pay others to do it, as in their own lives. When they
Mm-hmm.
do become active, however, they generally make excellent precinct leaders. The intelligence, skill, education, and ability professionals. So they have a lot of skills. Frequently, much of the precinct work in high-income areas is done by women.
Okay.
Well, if they're home housewives, they don't have nothing to do. Now, low-income precincts. The problem of obtaining good precinct leaders in low-income precincts is entirely different and just as difficult to solve. A major problem with people with low incomes, working class, is to find a way to increase their income. Therefore, they often feel they can't afford to devote time to a volunteer job. Sometimes party leaders try to find a non civil service government job for a good precinct leader. Sometimes they can persuade a local businessman to hire a precinct leader in a suitable capacity. This is like I may have to I want to repeat this here. So sometimes a party leader will try to find a non like a private sector job for like they want to recruit a precinct leader, right, for a working class neighborhood.
Mm-hmm.
Basically give them a job from a allied business owner to give them an income,
I
I guess.
see.
Maybe it's a work, but it's like, are they doing? Does it mean they're getting two jobs or like?
Are they just getting the income from the line?
Yeah, like yeah. Here's the thing with the guy I just met yesterday. He works in the Senate, and basically there were rules about how they can't work for an office, political office, and do political work at the same time, right? Simple. Um, they simply terminate their employment with the office, and then hire them on in the party, and then they're a party
Oh,
worker.
okay.
So they get the same income, the same salary,
Uh huh.
but now they have a different title that is in a conflict. But this is how the Democratic Party or the Republicans will always have a large staff to review every petition signature for throwing out third-party petitions or or their opponents' petitions. They
Right.
always have people who do phone banking and calling. It is and they're paid to do it because they have the infrastructure through the government to pay them. Isn't that great?
Wow. Yeah.
Um, Such people, and that's why it's sort of when you do have people in office, like from our team, they will also have resources to pay full-time organizers or staffers to do that work, to the work we've been discussing in all these pamphlets. So, anyways, years ago, the big city machines had little trouble finding precinct leaders in low-income areas. The leader had at their disposal a wealth of city jobs and jobs with contractors who had city contracts. For those who could not be given jobs, political clubs served as welfare centers, distributing Christmas baskets, help of all kinds in return for votes and workers, doing mutual aid. In addition, politics was considered a ladder to higher income and better things. Today, fewer political jobs are available, and capable persons can forge ahead more readily in all fields than was formerly true. Which is why it always kind of feels like a lost opportunity when we do all this mutual aid, but like, are we really recruiting? It's done as separate from political organizing. Now I know there are anarchists that like will do mutual aid by giving out tacos, and they have the anarchists lit like Racco. So I guess there's that,
That's
but
good.
there's that kind of stuff, and then there's also like all the mutual aid, like the free store, or whatever. And it's like the ideology of giving things away or doing things that are just like we're not doing this to raise money for something else or to pay or run salaries or whatever. It's like there's no corruption there or whatever. It's all on the level. We're just
Right.
doing it to help you.
Because it's the right thing, yeah.
But it seems like a lost opportunity that's like, oh, we also want you to be for the next project or to grow so we can do more than
Yeah,
just
fair enough.
the mutual aid. I had like again, it was a jaded leftist, but he was like, I don't see a difference between mutual aid and charity. I actually think he actually wasn't radical enough, really, from where I was standing, where like
Yeah.
he felt like, well, I don't think we should poo-poo charity. You know, it's like there's nothing wrong with charity. We need more of it. I'm like, but it's built on inequality and reproduces inequality.
Well, and
But then you have to justify, well, how is mutual aid not justified? Because when I see people doing mutual aid, well, actually, no, that's not true. I'll walk that back because I was literally on the leftist panel where it's the homeless are just as much involved with doing mutual aid as, you know, middle class activists. So, but it comes to mind first, you know, because that's where I'm from.
Okay.
So, people who work arduously on many other types of community projects are difficult to convince politics is just as important. Which is, but by the way, like everything 60s onward, that when party politics and things failed for boomers and Gen Xers, they turned to doing community projects and nonprofit work, and that's apolitical. So it's difficult to get them to convince them to do more than just be good Democrats who vote defensive.
Yeah.
And that mindset has, of course, been passed to their children or everyone else. And it's difficult to, it's like you got to deprogram or retrain the muscle to go beyond that. Especially when the community projects deliver some of the good some of the time. But it's still always, I would use the metaphor of like you're fighting against the current. You're rowing, you're in a rowboat and you're rowing, you're moving a foot with every row, but the river's pushing you a foot back, or the river's pushing you half a foot back. So it takes you twice as long than if you got out of the boat.
Yeah.
The river being the river is the system, by the way.
Right. Yeah. I mean, so much of nonprofits and charities, the charities especially, but the entire nonprofit sector, a lot of it's just set up to basically launder the money of rich people. It is a place where they can donate, get a tax dodge, and then put, family members on the board and friends on the board. And they have to do a couple meetings a year and collect an entire salary and stuff like that. So though it can do some good, so much of the money that goes into charities is just going right back up to those elite people who run them.
But there is some that can occur, though I'm not an entryist kind of thinker. But one of the SP is kind of my Socialist Party local chapter has basically kind of been inactive, less active as a group lately, and the reason is I think they've taken on a platformist strategy where one of them has, I don't know if he was doing volunteer work for them before, but he is now the project director for United Tenants of Albany, which is not a autonomous tenants union, though it seems that his project is to make it something more like that, with organized tenants. because their main task, and they are, I think, get money from the county to do this, just do eviction defense to make sure people
Oh, that's
are
it.
stay housed as long as possible or as much as possible. But it is a full time job. It takes multiple volunteers and or paid staffers even to do eviction
Yeah.
defense because you got to go to court every day to basically help people out. But it's putting out brush fires when the forest fire is property ownership, but
Right.
or landlords themselves.
Yeah.
And obviously Cannon, his name's Canyon is a socialist who obviously knows that. So I will have to talk to him eventually. Maybe I will have him on my show as I do local news now. Will be doing. I'll have him on to talk about is there things shifting with United Tenants of Albany? Will it be a tenants union? Is there an actual membership of a due paying membership now? Which I guess you could be like a supporter, of course, but it didn't feel like I was in a union or a tenants union.
Mm,
It's United Tenants of Albany,
I
um,
see.
because it's a nonprofit. Because I went to their their dinner, and it's always just kind of more political hoi polloi.
Mhm.
Years ago, the big city machines. Oh yeah, sorry, I'm repeating that. Perhaps that is why a party leader is a leader in the true sense of the term. Real leadership ability is required to find and inspire people who will do the precinct work necessary to win elections. Um, yeah, so they did not provide a solution to the problem that basically, because of anti-corruption reforms of to break up patronage and machine politics, how do you get working class people politically involved? You need a basic material structure to support them first. So a network, and this is probably where Cooperation Jackson comes in, where they spend 10 years doing co-op work to provide people jobs, meet basic needs, and then they were able to be politically active and elect people to office.
Hmm.
But then it became an issue and a debate of whether that was the right use of resources.
Hmm.
They they won city government in Jackson, Mississippi,
Yeah.
and then the county and the state authorities cracked down and blocked them from doing anything substantial.
Oh.
And so it made their tenure in office not very effective,
Oh
not
man.
many results, not much results. So got to review it, but basically it comes up as an argument against doing electoralism at all,
Yeah.
instead of just build I'm sorry, economic power
Right.
with community projects, community economics. Um, Whether or not you call it eco socialism or not, some of their people will do that. Um, okay, so yeah. Training workers. Effective political workers have the attitude and orientation necessary to participate successfully, and the skills and knowledge to do political jobs. Oh, easy and simple enough, right? Political leader must largely leave the acquisition of political attitudes by inexperienced workers to time and association with those who know better, or politicians. He can do a good deal, however, to speed the training in knowledge and skills. A recent development in both parties is the political workshop, or school of politics, a series of meetings held periodically. Each meeting deals with a particular phase of politics, such as organizing, precinct work, campaigns, etc. This is something the Green Party does regularly, on a yearly basis in the form of live streams now. We did a panel on running a campaign, though what we haven't done is precinct work. So that's always been missing. How to actually start locally and
Hmm.
whatever. But I think that comes in the form of panel talks and discussions about just general how to organize, and then usually boils down to you just have 100 conversations. It just takes a lot of patience. You have
Yeah.
conversations, you build relationships with people, and that relationship is over the political project, because you're engaging them as, a party worker or an activist or organizer. And I always draw a distinction between an activist and an organizer, um, which needs to be kind of talked about or reinforced. Um, an activist is someone who's like part of mobilization and not organization, because it's like ad hoc, anarchistic. It's kind of how the way the things have been over our lifetime, and we can all, we've discussed how that just isn't really effective, hasn't been effective. The left has just been, the losers. Yeah, and we weren't losers when we had organizations. And I know when it came to the '60s and skepticism of not just modern narratives, postmodernism, it was a skepticism with basically all organization, because that's, to many's experience, it was where corruption happens. It's where undue authority is, and so you just stay away from it. But that, if you're middle class, it seems effective. But they'll also remit in many of their books that the problems are so big, and obviously what we've been doing is not enough, or hasn't been enough. But it's like we don't know what else to do.
Right. Yeah.
We really don't know what else to do.
Right.
And that's why I'm like, well, I want to know what else to do. And I found, well, to be honest, Marxist-Leninism as, the thing that wasn't being considered. I'll put it that way. It's the thing that wasn't being considered at all. Leaders also urge precinct leaders to hold training meetings and so on, such as those described in the pamphlet on political meetings. That's the next one. Okay. Let's talk about patronage. Next is patronage. Handling patronage is one of the political leaders' biggest problems, although less patronage is available today than a few years ago. This was in '59. Patronage is generally misunderstood by the average. And you could say that the New Deal was kind of, and a lot of reforms that occurred over the Great Depression was what the thing that broke patronage as a form. Now in Albany, it continued, and I think just like with racism and the just how whites believe that the Civil Rights Act ended racism, a lot of people seem to fact that there was something that occurred in the last 60 years that ended patronage in Albany, or let's say your city. I'd like to see proof. And the proof is not that you have tests for political office. That doesn't mean shit. But it does mean a lot in this conversation of what it used to be like, where you literally just you appoint people to positions to be workers in your party. It's generally misunderstood by the average citizen as rewarding incompetent party hacks with political sincerities. There is, however, of course, some of this in politics, which is just one of those oh, sure, there are some problems, but that doesn't mean the whole system's rotten. There is, of course, some of this in politics, just as there is occasionally an incompetent son-in-law or an irresponsible uncle on the payroll of a family-owned business. Patronage is a political fact of life. It's just the way things are. It is important to understand its use in building and maintaining an effective party or organization and in running a successful government. Clifton White has classified patronage into 3 basic types: job, contract, and psychological. Let's talk about job patronage. The first function of job patronage is to put persons into government positions who are in harmony with administration policy. Ed Flynn, who is the head of the Bronx Democrats, explained it this way: I cannot resist one last observation on the spoils system, because there is something about the clamor against it that puzzles me, and always has. There is a fight for control of a corporation. A group of stockholders are dissatisfied with management. A battle of proxies takes place, and the group in opposition to the management succeeds in controlling the voting stock. They vote the stock. Do they leave their defeated enemies in control? If they did, they would have wasted the effort to wrest control from them in the first place. No, they throw the losers out. What puzzles me is this: why does something that in business circles is called plain common sense become something sinister, called something like spoil system, or in terms of maybe talking about geopolitics, Stalinism? Uh,
Yeah.
when applied to larger businesses or the biggest business in the land, government. Um, but I think it's just a matter of people wanting consistency, that they don't like it when a corporation does that, actually. They would like, in their heart of hearts, that capitalism works like a democracy, which is why everyone says they want a free market capitalism, because in their mind, that's some kind of democratic capitalism,
Some kind of fair and just system. Yeah.
which, our task is to convince that doesn't really exist. That's a myth. It's a fairy
That's
tale.
not possible. Yeah.
It's not possible. Is more, yeah, more. That's right. That's the more accurate way of putting it. Because it's like, oh, it's a lie, but it could happen. It just hasn't been tried yet. We haven't had it yet.
Yeah. Right.
So similarly, obviously, we don't want that authoritarianism happening in parties or government, which is
Right.
why the push for beating back patronage systems and political machines was done, which was in conjunction with the economic changes that were occurring post New Deal, post socialist movement. Got to put that in. So voters select an administration, but if that administration cannot fill policy positions in government, so here's the defense of patronage jobs, okay,
Okay.
which actually comes up in our current news cycle sometimes. Voters select an administration, but if that administration cannot fill policy positions in the government with people who are sympathetic to their views, the will of the electorate is actually thwarted. For example, some political scientists have suggested that President Eisenhower's, you can also replace this with maybe President Biden or President Trump, their administration was hampered because so few policy-making jobs on the second, third, and fourth levels were available for political appointments. They're long bureaucrats who are maybe, well, they make up what is called the deep state. They are not political appointments. They're not
That's true.
in line to any ideology except maybe their own power,
Yeah.
or because they're a class of bureaucrats that have a purpose and function in the capitalist economy, which is that their power and authority rests with how they manage things for the capitalists. So it doesn't matter who's president; it's capitalism that rules. And so the deep state, so that's the thing to point out to Qers or any kind of conspiracy theorists, is that when it comes to the deep state, you got a follow-up question about who do they really serve, like what interests do they serve? It's like, well, it's capitalism, obviously. Or if you don't think it's obvious, then it becomes Jews or Marxists. It's actually the opposite. It's Marxists who are actually the deep state, because they're obviously not capitalists because they're in public service. Right?
Yeah.
They're in public service. That's the opposite of capitalism.
Yeah.
They're the enemy, right? They're like cats and dogs. They could never be on the same side.
No. And if they are, we have to call it crony capitalism, as though it's a special thing that only happens
Or
in certain conditions.
corporate communism.
Yeah.
Crony capitalism when it's Jon Stewart. Corporate communism when it's Fox News. So the Eisenhower administration, on taking office, found it was legally entitled to appoint 0.02% of all federal jobs. Political scientists have expressed a belief that so few political appointments might prevent an incoming party from effectively gaining control of the executive branch and carrying out the mandate of the voters. So I think this definitely holds true today. It's not just new president, but same Congress.
Right.
The Congress is also Democrat controlled. So there's obviously more going on than just what party is in the majority. It's not like a stockholder meeting, because in a stockholder meeting, the people who have the majority actually win, and then they are able to give the vote to the losers.
That's
The
absolutely
losers
true.
being managers, though, not you other stockholders, though.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so the Hoover Commission recommended that at least 5,000 top positions should be exempt from civil service in order to give the president control of the executive branch. I think in Albany, we have a civil service test for city jobs, but it feels like, or maybe in practice, informally, a lot of jobs are still treated and operate like political appointments. You have to be on the mayor's good side. You have to be with the
Oh,
program.
I see.
If you're not, well, I just read a whistleblowers report,
Mm-hmm.
which was more like, it was just more of a journalism where they gathered all of some documents, some emails, and conversation in a common council meeting to basically draw the conclusion that the mayor used discretionary funds from the COVID rescue funds, to
Mm-hmm.
give city workers a raise, which is all well and good. Nobody opposes raises for workers.
Mm-hmm.
But what the emails, or what needs to be proven, is that, or what can only be really insinuated, is that the mayor tied, who did this during an election year, and that they would
Uh,
tie getting the raises to their vote, their support for the mayor. But this raises further questions of like, well, how? Well, the point is, it was rescue funds that the mayor's office controlled, and the council didn't really have a say, and they didn't have any oversight.
hmm,
But like, and that's the thing that the council has. It's the only power they really have. They don't have control of the
really?
money at all. So, yeah, yeah,
Oh,
yeah. That's why Common Council in Albany, they're always like, they're more pawns than bishops, or they're not
interesting.
between, like they're not layers. It's like, it's the mayor's office. That's what matters. We're a mayor-controlled city.
So you have a very strong mayor system.
So it's like, well, of course, everyone who's on the city payroll has to vote for the mayor. What else would they do? And if it wasn't an election year, like they'd probably be fired or punished somehow, or
Yeah.
left out of the next round of raises if they didn't support the mayor. It's not like just because it's between elections doesn't mean like it's
True
no
enough.
longer a
That
political
there's yeah.
position.
That there's no.
So
Yeah.
I kind of have a
That's a good
mindset, and
point.
I came to this in college as well, that it's like, well, maybe all positions should be political. All these apolitical positions, I mean, it was seen as a to solve problems,
Sure.
especially in the past. It was a bad. There was a lot of problems with all the political appointments, patronage jobs. You got
Mm-hmm.
incompetent people, and you just got a lot of yes men and people. But it
Right.
allowed people in office to do things, to carry out policy. I think the problem was that the policy was always just, for ruling class interests, whatever,
Right.
um, and it would be for their own pocketbooks, own pockets. But that's capitalism in action. It's just using
Yeah.
government as another company.
Mm-hmm.
So no political reform can work until we have economic reform. It's kind of one of the conclusions of like, oh, I'm a socialist now.
Yeah. Yeah. Right.
I'm not going to fool around with the social democracy thing where we can
Right.
change government and tax the rich. That was tried once before. It's called the New Deal
Yeah.
era.
Oh yeah.
Um, so let's move on. Job patronage is also used to provide a source of income to effective party workers. Above a certain level of political responsibility, the demands on a politician's time are heavy. They should be compensated, right?
Mm-hmm.
As long as we have a wage system. Certain non civil service public offices, principally on state, county, and local levels, will provide such people with income, somewhat flexible arrangement of working hours, and an office at the county courthouse or city hall, where they are available for political as well as business purposes. Such job holders are often people of real ability who, under these circumstances, can give the taxpayer his money's worth and at the same time handle party responsibilities. This is very optimistic because, in my experience, and this is where I get the whole like city jobs are still patronage jobs to me because
Mm-hmm.
I see city workers always doing the bare minimum. They're always just doing the bare minimum, sometimes less than minimum. Like they don't, or they do help you, or they do like their job, but it's like they don't want to do it. They have this attitude of like, "Ugh, I guess I'll help you."
You're putting them out by making them do what they're supposed to do.
Yeah. Or you get this runaround of like you show up to the clerk's office and ask for something like a form. They're like, "Oh, I
Hmm.
don't have that. That's the
Yeah.
other
Yeah.
place." And then you get a
Right.
bunch of. We did this at Occupy as a joke when people would ask like, "Who's in charge?" But it's like, who's responsible here? Who's doing the work? Somebody
Yep.
else.
Them.
It's not me. I'm only paid the median salary in the city. Um, contract patronage. Most government business. So yeah, there are also many jobs of a minor nature. So this section just explains patronage jobs, right? It doesn't say anything about whether they're good or bad, or it does make an argument that there should be a certain amount of patronage jobs, so that parties, the main parties in particular, actually can do things and actually pay their staff, pay people who do the work. That's very interesting about like why we have a two-party system and why we can't really dislodge it. Because until a third party or a third option or two other parties
Right.
get into government and are able to give enough patronage jobs to those that are qualified because the testing system and the rules in place will not allow that. You can
Hmm.
appoint who you want, but they have to pass the test first.
Have to go
That's
through
what
a
civil
test first.
service basically testing does. It makes sure that the people getting the patronage job are somewhat qualified or qualified enough, but it doesn't stop it from being like, oh yeah, I know you, I'll hire you. It's
Hmm.
still a matter of who you're when you're hired at a job, they have to know you first, or they have to
Hmm.
know someone you know.
Right.
This whole like, I'm always incredulous when I hear like, oh yeah, I got hired on the spot. I just
It's like, who did
I'm
you know?
incredulous, and I don't
Yeah.
know what I feel like I'm being punked. Like, are you
Yeah.
serious?
Right.
You were hired on the spot? Now, if it's Walmart or like I was hired at the grocery store I worked at, that was pretty much on the spot. I didn't need a reference
Sure.
because service sector jobs are like dime a dozen. They're desperate for people, high turnover. In fact, they like
Yeah.
high turnover. Okay,
Yeah.
that's where you don't need a reference. You don't
Sure.
need prior experience. They're expecting like they're working with teenagers and stuff.
Hmm.
But any position that isn't a cashier, then and I'm talking about like in the economy, it's like you need to be overqualified. But you need a reference. Anyway, we went over that. Contract patronage. Most government business is done on a bid basis. There are, however, some areas of discretion. Though the many reforms over the years and rules, there's layers of rules about contract bidding to make sure that it isn't patronage. And it's like, qualified, not a gimme,
Hmm.
but somehow it still happens nonetheless.
Somehow it still
Like
happens. Yeah.
in New York State, there's always going to be some yearly scandal where there was no bid contracts,
Hmm.
or it's done in ways that aren't really contracts but private public partnerships, where it isn't a direct hiring or bidding process,
Right.
but really when this company pays the most money for the governor's campaign, and then the governor pays, gets
Does
them
it public
to
private? Yeah.
build the stadium in Buffalo that costs
Right.
$5 billion. You gotta
It's pretty
ask,
clear what's
what
happening.
are all these rules really doing?
Right.
Except keeping out the little guy.
Yeah.
And that's crony capitalism, I guess.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I guess if anything, it keeps the theater of it going, so that
Yeah.
you can still tell school children that
It just shows that like there's
we live in
still
a
too
democracy.
much politics, right? It's the problem is they're still too political, it's still too partisan. We need to be post politics, like apolitical, just market forces. That's the ideology most have. And uh,
Hmm.
dream to some, nightmare to others. Or it's made life a nightmare because it's kept us all out of the political process by pretending that it's no longer political, or it's not.
Mm-hmm.
It's still too political because
Mm-hmm.
there's still patronage happening, or corruption, but it's like, yeah, but it's only with the rich or business owners, but not. But see, if you are a business owner, it's like, and you didn't get the patronage contract, it's like that's why you go to Trump, because, or you go reactionary, because it's like you're just as disenfranchised now
Uh-huh.
as an underclass person, and that's the worst thing you can ever be. It's like you're
Yeah,
powerless,
obvious. Yeah,
because that's
yeah.
what they say. I'm powerless because I'm not rich enough to have an effect on the major parties, because I'm not a millionaire or
Uh-huh.
billionaire. I'm just well, I'm a millionaire, but I'm not a billionaire. So less is
Very true.
psychological patronage. Because a political leader can generally do little to reward effective service, which is why a lot of people don't give their service, he often relies on psychological patronage, which could also be called prestige or simply recognition, which of course is one of the things when we say, like, how will people be motivated in a socialist economy if they're not motivated by profit.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but again, this doesn't have much effect when we still have a capitalist economy. So
Right.
it's like, well, the point of the socialist economy is so that the psychological patronage is actually the only type of patronage.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
that's how we actually get politics out of the people's work, and thus this is in Marxist Leninism, like, oh, once we're socialist enough, you won't need the party. We'll just have your
Mm-hmm.
local planning committee, or your state. You you have the regional state committee, and the state starts withering away,
Yeah, yeah. That's the hope.
and it
Uh-huh.
just becomes economics. Well, that's Marx.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Seating a few workers on the platform with VIP speakers at a rally, creating a job. And I see this in action, by the way, with nonprofit folks. They get to be on the dais with the politicians, and they feel all good. And I just, like, my mind is just sell out. Um, but they also get a salary. So occasionally,
Yeah,
there is
sure
also the
enough.
possibility of appointment to special temporary advisory boards of local government on a non salary basis. Well, there you go. That's the psychological patronage that you get for, being a team player.
Yeah,
You'll
yeah.
never, even if they're not, like, supporting the mayor, they will not attack, or they will not work against the mayor. They will go along to get along, and
Makes sense. Yeah.
neutralizing would-be activists or community leaders with psychological patronage. Sometimes it's literal, but sometimes, like, just investing in the neighborhood with public money, like,
Mm,
we'll build a new stair in the park.
right.
Like, that's patronage to me, because it's like, because now that community leader is standing with the mayor, like, thank you, mayor. You've done a great service for us after the
Yeah.
last mayor didn't. Now
Yeah.
it's like, they're not going to say they're bought, of course, but that's what it looks like to me. Because now, whenever, if I do talk to them later about, some kind of political project, I might get some hemming and hawing about, like, well, we can't really do that. We'll be making enemies if we do that.
Yeah.
It's not forthcoming. We were threatened or whatever, or it's just, there are books about this. Books explaining this. Now, patronage poses problems. Patronage is a two-edged sword of a political leader. It can be used as an incentive. It can also be used to provide them with an income, thus enabling them to actually devote time to politics. So I find that weird, because if they have a job, they're doing the job. Why would they have free time to do politics? But I suppose
Right. Well, if you're an
it's
owner,
an
I
odd
suppose.
thing. Well, they're not. They don't have to hustle, I suppose. So there's that. Giving them, sometimes stability is what is meant by an income. To have an income is to have stability, and stability allows you to have free time. Some political leaders claim it is possible to build and maintain an excellent organization without dispensing any patronage. Where this is possible, it relieves the leader of the onerous job of continually seeking patronage for their followers, and mollifying those who must be refused it. Most political leaders believe, however, that patronage is a useful tool, and that's killed some presidents, by the way, mollifying people you couldn't give patronage to, which is
Ah,
why
yeah, right.
reforms were kind of on the docket in the Gilded Age, because a president was assassinated. President Garfield was assassinated
Ah,
over
okay.
this by someone who didn't get a post office job, and he shot the president over it.
I didn't know that history. That's cool.
You didn't know that? Oh, okay.
I didn't know that that's
Yeah,
what led to all those reforms at that time. No.
pretty much. Once someone high enough gets shot, reforms start taking place, even if they're not totally effective, because obviously kind of they weren't. But it was the beginning of it. The whole like you got to pass the law before you can fight to actually enforce it.
Gotcha.
So the next section is financing. The operations must be financed. This involves raising money and spending it to an advantage. Most people think of political contributions in terms of campaigns. Political leaders know the campaign requires the greatest amount, but it is the work done on a year-round basis that lays the foundation for successful campaigns. Here's a saying, an old saying that probably needs to be readapted to the times, but $1 in the spring is worth $2 in October. I'm going to repeat that a lot more now from now on, because I have not heard this saying. We don't have a saying to say we need to pay dues, so we we understand.
I guess it's what is that? Um, uh, is it a penny of cure or a penny of prevention's worth a pound of cure, something
Sure.
like that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
That's a Ben
that's pretty
Franklinism.
Yeah, yeah,
That is how I feel about I'd rather put in dues than pay hundreds of dollars to Bernie Sanders once. But it needs to be framed to people as a selling point for party participation or organization for organizing that the work is year round. It can't just be done in response to a crisis. Everyone
right.
is quick to give money to Planned Parenthood when news
When they're
about
being threatened, right?
the judiciary comes out. But what about all the other past years where literally my whole life, where it's been a drumbeat of stories year in, year out about Republicans rolling back abortion access?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And there's always been calls for action and calls for donations from Planned Parenthood, but no real plan or strategy to actually fight this. There's been a powerlessness in Planned Parenthood and that movement, which isn't really a movement at all. There hasn't been a movement, or there was, but a movement is not an organization. A movement for like the Women's March, didn't accomplish shit as far as I'm concerned,
Yeah.
because it was just a feel-good rally when Trump was elected, and each year less women would show up, and it would just be more and more neoliberal in character, though it always was. And neoliberals are powerless to stop reactionaries and fascists. You've talked about that enough, haven't you?
Mm-hmm.
Or us leftists harp on that.
Yes, we do.
So let's not buy into their way of thinking. Let's pay dues for collective action.
There we go.
Sources of money. Methods of political financing have changed drastically since the turn of the 20th century. For many years, the two political principal sources were regular contributions by political job holders and large contributions from wealthy individuals. So that's the thing. It's almost like a tithe where you give people a patronage job and they're going to give a portion of their income to the party. Because, hey, they wouldn't have had the job otherwise, so you might as well.
That's true, yeah.
And when you're in a completely capitalist, non-politicized economy, I guess, obviously you don't have any loyalty to your boss or the corporation you work for.
Yeah.
Though there are corporations that will say you need to donate some money to the Republican Party when you're fired.
Yep,
There's
they
been
do,
stories of
those
that.
stories do come up. It seems once a big election cycle.
Um, but otherwise, what do you have to give your money to except, I guess, charities? And that's why you'll have charities ask for not so much dues, but every year they ask for a set amount of money. It's like paying an annual due. And that way, these organizations, whether they be police associations or fire
Hmm.
departments or veterans groups, they get dues. They're able to continue. AARP, though AARP is much weaker now, I suppose. They like because well, I had a conversation about it with one of my clients where it's like she doesn't believe in their work anymore. She feels that the system's too corrupt and even organized. Old people, retired people don't have any power. So what's the point? So I'm not going to give money to them anymore.
Hmm.
Very defeatist and self-defeating because obviously
Yeah.
if you're going to take away your support from an organization, of course they're going to be less powerful. But it's like, well, they're yet less powerful even when I'm giving them money, which is maybe how Planned Parenthood kind of feels, but or feels like, but that's only when talking about red states where they basically been outlawed, and so it's like,
Effectively, yeah.
so I think
Hmm.
their response to my little rant was, "What are we supposed to do? We've basically been outlawed." And I'm like, well, I guess my thing would be, well, act more radically and do things illegally. But as a official nonprofit, they can't risk doing anything illegal. So it's up to the legalists among us to do that work.
Hmm. Hmm.
Because hell, the when freedom riders uh, went down to south to basically guys to politically organize people, um, I guess it was a lot of people just giving their time. I mean, the stories I've read about, northern college students white college students coming down to
Hmm.
register people to vote and build the civil rights movement. Um, they were just being hosted in people's homes. It's not like they were
Yeah.
using savings or they didn't have an income to work off. It was all just hand to mouth, staying with people while doing the work. And in some communities there that exists, like for example, when I went to a conference, I stayed at a co-op house. So it's not like these things are like unheard of now. It just has to be existing and you have to know about it. So if you haven't been connected in these networks yet, it just seems like
Yeah.
there's no infrastructure to do anything.
Right.
But there is.
Anything gets done.
It's
Hmm.
just completely ad hoc.
Yeah.
It's not organized in the way I see it.
Yeah.
It's there,
Oh.
but it's ad hoc, and
Yeah.
so it could be there one year, but not the next, and or it's here in this town, but not like in Philadelphia, but it's not in St. Louis, kind of thing. That's what it feels like.
Yeah. I feel
I
that
have feelings, but not facts. So there's mail solicitation or just email solicitation, which
too.
is
Hmm.
actually how Green Party and other
Hmm.
us radical groups, we send out those email blasts, and it seems like just going to the spam folder, but
Yeah.
they do get something from it. There are
Do
people
they?
who do respond. It's just kind of that the rule is that for every like 100 solicitations you send out, you get 10
Yeah.
responses. One person
10%
actually
rule.
donates,
Sure.
and I hate that kind of like, it just means there's so much more work. But hey, we're
Right.
we're a country of 350 million people. It's
Hmm.
we'll get to that tipping point. If you just keep getting that one person, it's not always the same one person. Just
Right. Well,
if
it's
it
always not
is,
just the same one
it
person.
is, you're in trouble. But
Yeah. 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 They're not always going to be
yeah.
there for you.
But even when I was just advertising to sell a car, and I had that same proportion of people who responded to the ad saying their interest, like they want to know more, and I gave them the phone number to call to know more, and only, and so like I probably reached hundreds of people with the ad, right?
Right.
As Facebook says, put in $5, reach 300 people.
Sure.
A dozen responded saying they're interested. One person actually called. That's organizing.
Yep. Yeah, I had the exact
Uh,
same experience selling a couch or giving away a couch for free
yeah. Well,
on Facebook too.
conversely, though, the not the free store, but the buy nothing Facebook groups,
Mm,
those actually have the reverse happen. You have tons of
really?
people
A lot of people who really
respond
want that
quickly.
stuff.
Yeah, yeah, it's weird. Maybe because it's like it doesn't cost anything. It's
Yeah.
I think yeah, that's probably the difference. If it doesn't cost
Yeah.
something, you're giving something away, people will line up around the block, and they'll
Yeah.
actually show up. You
Oh
actually
yeah.
have three
No.
people show up, and and or it's like first come first serve, and you have to let the other two know that they were too late. Um, then because that just happened today, where I just had this chest and I put it out, but it was raining, so I'm like, oh shit, I have to bring it in, but it was gone. So I guess
Already gone. Wow.
somebody took it. But this is while I was communicating
Someone
with
was
someone
wrong.
through the group because I said, if you're interested and you don't just want to pick it up, DM me so I can pull it in and save it for you.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I was a little slow on that. Next is the house to house canvas, going around and asking people for donations or to recruit them as due paying members. But for that, it probably takes a few conversations before you sell them on it or convince. Um, let's see. Let's read this part. This method, excellent in theory, requires the organization of a house-to-house canvass by precinct leaders and their helpers during a stated period. The assistance of like a dues campaign,
Hmm.
um, which is something that I really want to do with the Greens. The assistance of local news media in publicizing the drive can help promote public acceptance, so they know like you're not a scammer. Nationwide activities of the Advertising Council and the American Heritage Foundation have helped create public awareness of the importance of political contributions. Do we have anything like that today? Few political leaders have seriously tried to undertake a house to house canvass for political funds. Many precinct leaders are not enthusiastic because it requires another full scale operation, in addition to registrations and get out the vote drives. But for us, I think, for us leftists, getting new paying members for an organization so we have a budget to work with, so that maybe if there's enough, we could actually pay someone, even if it's just like part time, $1,000 a month, like YouTuber or Twitch money, or Patreon money. I guess sort of Patreon is like kind of maybe it's a canvas thing, but again, you want it to be local people because you're building a local org that can do work and do local politics. Because you don't really see Patreon projects where it's like, give them my Patreon. I'm doing political organizing in my neighborhood. Uh,
Hmm. Sure enough.
have we had? Now, obviously, we have crowdfunding for candidates of all kinds,
Yeah,
but
but not
it's
just for
ad
anyone.
hoc. It's for a particular
Yeah.
candidate,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and it's not for a particular party or party building. And that's where. Do you remember the guy in Washington State who raised a ton of money online? He was like a viral, he was running a congressional candidacy, and he effed it up in that he had all this money, but because he was a purely online national viral
Oh.
campaign, he actually had no local volunteers. Right now, he had all this money. He probably could have paid a lot of people, but he didn't have the means of recruiting. Likely,
Just
he didn't
didn't have the
know
organization.
how to run a campaign,
Yeah.
and he
Yeah.
didn't hire a
And
campaign
and and
manager.
didn't. Well, see
I
that's like
guess
the
he didn't.
main
His name was
reason.
Josh something.
Yeah.
But anyway,
Huh.
but a lot of people gave money to him because he was saying that I think he was running as a Dem. And this was like, there was a lot of people that were like, the requirement for their political support or their monetary support was that this was about a Democratic primary. They're still like very much entryists or Bernie Crats. That's who that it's spread out that way among those circles in Twitch politics. And but then he went back on it and said, "I'm going to run an independent campaign." Maybe because like I have so much money, I feel like I could do it, and that just pissed everyone off, and they wanted their money back, as if it
Oh
were a
no.
business, and that
Oh no.
that campaigns issue refunds.
Right.
Um,
A
and
return on
then
my investment.
to me, it was funny. It was funny, like the comedy of it. To others, something that would make them jaded and never want to donate to any candidate or party ever again. But to me,
Yeah.
it was more of a tragedy because they didn't want to give to a party. They only wanted to give to a candidate that was
To
going to
go
run
against.
into them
Yeah, yeah.
in a primary. And that's the way they think about challenging politics or doing progressive politics. So that made me sad in that way.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we're not we got not too much left.
Cool.
There's money raising dinners. Okay, I don't really like those, but
I just
uh,
like those two.
talks about Century Clubs, a good quality, well designed lapel button bearing the inscription Century Club, are distributed to members of the party finance committee. When the lapel buttons attract the attention of their friends and business associates, the committee member explains that they too can become members of the club by contributing a Century note to the party. They then collect $100 in exchange for the button. The names of the club and the amount of the required contribution varies from place to place. It sounds like a scam, man.
Yeah, you're right.
You get entrance into the special club. You just have to give
Part
X
of our
amount of
Diamond
money
Elite Club. Yeah.
to the organization. But I suppose, well, just like how on Patreon, right? You give us there's certain tiers to level.
Yeah.
There's levels, right? I think
There's
it's just
levels.
saying give enough to the org, and you're a special member.
You get that
You
club.
get a tier. You get a Thought Slime will draw a picture of you
There you
of
go.
your choice,
Yeah.
right? Which I like. I find those cute.
Yeah, that's cool. I only
Do you know what I
tier on
mean?
my
Thought with
Patreon.
Thought Slime.
Yeah.
Due style contribution. So this is where the Green Party wants to go, and it's where SP and IWW go as well. The Century, because they're unions. Century Club idea and the full scale canvas are sometimes combined. All party members are solicited on a regular annual basis for party dues. This is in quotes, but really it shouldn't be. I don't believe it should be. In return for their contributions, they receive a card certifying that they are a regular party member or presented a similar button. We got buttons. Everybody can make buttons. We got a button,
Yeah.
and a card. Get when you become an IWW member, you get your red card, which I'm waiting on. But a few political leaders have experimented with this idea by setting it up on a graduated basis, with various classifications such as a contributing member, a sustaining member, a patron member, and then more. More ornate cards and buttons are given to those that make larger contributions. So it's just like Patreon. Social events, similar to, but that's enough to fund the income of one person. Could this be done with 5 people and then they're an actual political committee? Similar to money raising dinners are other types of social events such as covered dish suppers, dances, clam banks. Raffles are always very popular, forms of
Yeah.
gambling.
Yeah.
I find they don't make a lot of money, but obviously they're good morale boosters. If you're going to have a party, you might as well
It's good.
ask
It's good networking
people
opportunity.
for the money at least to pay for it. I've covered that with the campaign stuff. So generally, the party leader gives the money raising assignment to the finance committee. Usually, they select successful citizens who are well known as community leaders to serve on this because they inspire confidence among potential givers. But of course, if you're starting from nothing, it's like it only makes like more steps where it's like then you put before that the step of do community work that makes you trusted, a trusted community leader. Then you form a party committee and then start raising money for the party. But then it's like you have to keep doing the community work, right? Because if you just stop that and switch,
Yeah.
it's like it's tough. It's like
a little bit.
how are people going to take that?
Right.
And the same goes with like common council people. Like they got their political chops because they were involved with all these things, and they would still are. And it's like they collect these roles, and they're not really allowed to give them up because if they did, it's like they wouldn't have the credibility to be an office holder anymore. when they get reelected, the thing on their resume will just be, I'm just a common council person. I don't have these other things under my belt because, well, I wanted to focus on this. I guess you could make that argument and put in your campaign material, man, focused on the job. Um, so maybe it isn't such a problem, but it's a problem of like you got to do all these other community work. But a lot of
Yeah.
us as leftists should be doing it anyway, I suppose. I'm doing it.
That's true.
And I'm doing it for that express purpose. So when I do run for office again, I'm not a total schmo that did nothing for the community. No, I
Yeah.
help manage
It's
the
coming out of the
radio
woodwork.
station.
Hmm.
I've been involved. There's another 30 people that trust that I'm competent and that I was leader. And they say,
That makes
"You're
sense.
doing a great job, Dan. We're so appreciative." I'm getting psychological patronage, right? But I'm not
Yeah,
getting
no,
not getting
it's
any other
flourishing.
type, which angers me. That's why when I say like the board of Grand Street Community Arts are such a pain in the ass because they have it in their ideology that is maybe immoral even to pay someone to do work, to be for a nonprofit, that it needs to be all volunteer because they're volunteers
Hmm.
and they're full-time
It's
lawyers.
frustrating. Right.
So a united financing method. State, county, and local party committees, individual candidates, and auxiliary groups all may sponsor money-raising drives in the same campaign. As a result, individuals may be solicited several times, and candidates and leaders at different times may accuse one another of encroaching on the other's source of funds. To alleviate such causes of friction, united financing plans have developed in some areas. These plans operate in about the same way as the community chest. One contribute, which is a monopoly term that, what's a community chest now?
Hmm.
One contribution for all groups. Now, to me, this is the advantage of a party or a big organization that does many, many things, which is to me what a party eventually does once it has government.
Yeah, yeah. Ideally,
Um,
that would be my
that you don't need
vision too.
you don't need a housing org and a food org and a gardening org and a sustainability org that are all asking
Raise funds.
people for
Yeah,
donations year
yeah. It doesn't make
round
any
or
sense.
during the holidays.
That's just too much
And
harassment. Yeah.
this is one of the reasons that pushed me to like I want to do party work because then I'm just asking people to support the party. We gain power,
Right.
we
Right.
gain the power of the government purse, and then we fund everything that we need fucking need. And we don't need all these
Absolutely.
separate orgs to do it. We put it under government because but this it, asking for that is reversing everything that's occurred in the last century though. So it's kind of asking to reverse the flow of history and what would Marx call it? Um, the forces of history or whatever.
Mm.
So what are the forces of history? How to work with them? It's just so frustrating. Okay. But it's a good point. United financing so that, instead of being in silos, Occupy as a movement, I like this because Occupy could handle all these different projects and causes under one banner. And if you donated to Occupy, that money was being spread throughout all the working groups. There's a housing working group and a money out of politics working group. That's what I like. Now I try to get Occupy keep it going as a local organization,
Mm.
but it turns out anarchists don't want to be in an organization, and liberals have their own nonprofit organizations to do work with, and other social. So eventually, it just bled members and community
That's
minded
sad.
people would just say, "I'm too busy doing my community projects, and I don't have time to be
To do
political."
this. Yeah. Yeah.
To do political projects, which is what Occupy was for in my eyes. So, so I left Occupy and joined the Greens because the Greens have been around for 30 years and did all the things Occupy did, but just without the anarchism and what I thought without the anti-capitalism. And then once I learned there were anti-capitalists in the Green Party, then it was like, okay, that's why I'm making this I made the transition from that to that. Okay. So last is um, okay. So I'm going to skip the publicity section. It just have leaders should be mindful of PR, right?
Yeah, makes
Uh,
sense.
there's a lot of other things. Just YouTube education will probably give you everything you need to know. Don't leave it up to chance. Um, have a purpose when you do publicity. Publicity is a means to an end. Um, it's for attracting people to meetings, for recognition of people who've been working hard, aiding candidates, building membership, arousing public opinion on an issue. It doesn't say anything about whether like all publicity, is good publicity, whether or not
Hmm.
I believe there's such a thing as bad publicity. Um,
Definitely so.
Especially if you're not the dominant force. I think if you're not the status
Right.
quo, bad publicity does hurt you.
Yeah.
I can attest to this, where I can. I could make a scientific classification of people's reactions when I say I'm Green Party to how mad are they about Ralph Nader in
Hmm.
2000, uh, from on a 1 to 5 scale. Um, I encountered a 3 yesterday,
Ooh.
which was a
Still
um,
holding that grudge, huh?
well, a 3 is a someone who does blame Nader for Bush being elected somewhat, but really just sees the problem as like we didn't do a safe state strategy. Like I'll vote third party when it's safe,
When it's safe, yeah.
but safe state strategy. That's a 3.
Yeah.
5 is raging, like foaming at the mouth, blames leftists for uh, anything bad that Republicans do, like overturning Roe v. Wade.
Yeah.
If there are any Twitter comments about like this is the left's fault for electing Trump or something.
What?
Um, yeah,
Oh,
you haven't
man.
seen any of that. Maybe
I guess, yeah, I
not
shouldn't
online
be
enough.
surprised.
Well,
I try
it
to
goes
avoid
back to
Twitter.
Russiagate and factoring the Greens as part of it.
Wait, the Greens is part of Russiagate. How so?
Because Jill Stein went to an RT conference once.
That's it?
Yes, it was
So
about.
so
Well,
she
I'm
must
leaving.
be
I'm leaving.
responsible for spreading
I'm
all the
leaving out
information.
pertinent details, but they're not
Uh-huh.
details that matter. So it's an RT conference. It's about like peace, solving
Uh-huh.
like
Yeah.
problems. Because Russia's at the time not actively at war with anyone.
Right.
But anyway, it's about like kind of RT as having an anti-American imperialist line, right? And since Greens are anti-war and not really for American
Anti-imperialism.
imperialism, one of the
Yeah.
few orgs in the country that are,
Right.
Jill Stein went, and as she was sitting at a table, she also shared a table with someone who was in the Trump administration.
Hmm.
He wasn't at the time. This was before 2016, or it was 2016 or whatever. But it was Michael Flynn. But some Trump toady, but like not wasn't. They were just at the same table because they're both Americans. They're at the American table. But anyway, Putin comes along and sits at the table as well because there were open chairs, and swaps pleasantries with Jill Stein through a translator.
Hmm.
That's what happened.
That's it? That's it?
Yeah.
Okay.
And there's a picture with her at the
Wow, that
table
sounds
with.
so damning.
There's a table with her at the same table as Putin. There's a picture, and it's like this is damning evidence. This is all that they need to see to know that the
It's
Greens are
so
useful
ridiculous.
idiots for the fascists. And that wasn't really a play as much in 2020, but for then it was just the strategy of got to vote Trump out, which was very successful, but not
Yeah.
successful for anything else.
Right.
Um,
25% only.
Okay, so yeah, so I just want to breeze through that. Leader and candidates, I'm gonna just breeze through. Um, just standard, general, personal relations kind of stuff. Are you a people person? Um, Civic responsibility. Tremendous pressures for adopting unrealistic programs that may appeal to some voters and for setting up a political trough for the party faithful continually beset political leaders. It requires good judgment to know where to draw the line and courage to hold it. Political power carries with it responsibility. A wise leader recognizes his responsibilities to his community and his nation, as well as to his party and candidates, which is like saying, don't do anything that would upset the status quo.
Yeah.
That's the way we would read it, of course. Or it could
Mhm.
mean, keep the fascists out or whatever. Goes both ways.
Sure.
All the extremes are on the same team. Okay. I wanted to cover this, which is the last part. Holding the organization together. A basic problem of a political leader is holding his organization together. Experienced leaders learn to recognize the forces contributing to disunity. They know how to strengthen the forces that contribute to unity. So here are the forces that contribute to disunity. Sometimes there appear to be as many problems in holding an organization together as there are people in the group. There are 5 basic problems that can create disunity. Before I go through this, I actually skipped in the intro that there are 2 basic problems for leaders or any kind of leadership. The first is to build an effective organization that can win elections or particularly gain wins. The second problem is to keep the organization unified. You got to do both. Now, an organization may be unified, but small and weak, so it can't win elections, like maybe the Greens or the Socialist Party, Socialist Alternative.
Yeah.
Though sometimes I'll see that they're actually not unified either, and that they have their own splits, or these organizations have splits and they go defunct. Neither can a large organization of highly capable people expect to beat the opposition if it dissipates its energies into factional strife. These 2 major problems are composed of many smaller problems, such as finding and training party workers, and basically goes through like these 2 problems are made up of the smaller problems of all the things discussed in this pamphlet. So if you handle the day-to-day problems pretty well, you'll find that the larger problems have also been solved in the process. If you hold good meetings, then you won't have as many fights. If you're a good manager of personalities, you'll find that it comes up here. So the first force of disunity is factionalism. The MLs talk about this ad nauseum. Factionalism develops because cliques inevitably form in any political org. When cliques begin to struggle for power, unity is lost. Factionalism, but first you actually have to have power, right? But even in a group of 10, you can have like power struggle. And it's like, what are you even fighting over?
What are you even struggling over?
We don't have a budget, what are you it's like, what are you fighting over? And then of course then the group breaks up and then it's like they didn't get anything.
It's all for nothing. Got nowhere.
I'm actually referring to like anarchist cells or whatever.
Oh yeah, I've seen that sort of thing. Mm-hmm.
So factionalism occurs when political leaders allow cliques to develop uncontrolled. Now I don't know how there's some kind of controlled cliques. I don't know, like it feels nefarious and dystopian when you talk about cliques can form, but they have to be in a controlled manner. A good political leader may encourage, but it's more about encouraging friendly competition. But he will prevent it from becoming strong enough to destroy the org. Pretty vague, but
yeah.
Next is personality clashes. Strong personal dislikes frequently develop in a personal org. Unless these personality clashes are carefully handled, they can undermine the work of the org. So a personality clash can be just people with big egos, and it can be an ego problem, but it could also be like 2 people dated. This is what happened with the first BLM chapter in Albany. It was a group of 10 pretty radical activists, pretty good at doing the street demos, but they weren't really making any success because this was back in 2017. But again, second iteration of BLM, same issue. Although, you have some young people that are supercharged, and I see them, and I friend more of them on Facebook this time around. But last time, 2 of them dated. And they broke up, and basically split along lines of who they thought was at fault with that breakup. like who was abusing who or who was being the toxic person. Yeah. And this happens where like a leader is toxic and the power
Mm-hmm.
struggle is about removing the toxic person. But then you
Mm-hmm.
have toxic person has manipulated or just are friends with enough people
Uh-huh.
that
Yeah,
they
they're
have
like
their
cult
back. And it's
followers.
how
Uh-huh.
users get protected and even leftist groups have
Yeah.
problems enforcing or getting justice when there's a accusation of rape or sexual assault.
True, true.
And there's no way of having impartial accountability because actually there is a power structure, whether it's horizontal or not. There, you
Mm-hmm.
did not get rid of power dynamics just by saying that you don't have authority and you only have a committee
True.
or it's horizontal org, but you didn't set up an accountability body
Yeah, yeah.
and give it
Like
and give it the
critical
authority to say we're going to
to
determine
step in. Right.
a outcome and everyone's going to actually agree to it,
Yeah,
which
right.
is sort of a form of democratic centralism. You kind of need to
Yeah.
plug in some democratic centralism even in your anarchist organizing. Otherwise, it's not organizing. It's just a clique that's going to fight other cliques
Yeah.
for based on personality and who they think is toxic or not. That's what occurred in Albany between like basically one guy who was pretty good at events, and other anarchists that were part of the IWW who just didn't like him because he was just too anarchist or something, or not anarchistic, but just a pure fireworks.
Yeah, welcome to mid-May all the way through like the end of July in my neighborhood.
Well, mine has it too, but we haven't actually got because they don't
Yep.
start selling the fireworks till next month, so they will start next month for me, but not this month. So I guess in your state,
Yeah.
in
I've started to
Minneapolis, I
see
guess
them.
they sell them a little earlier, I guess.
Yeah, I've started to see them in stores, but it is almost always the neighbors right across the way there who treat their yard like they live way out in the country, running their dirt
Well, you have
bikes.
you have college students that set them off just in their street on the block, even
Yeah.
when there's lots of trees. You got in the neighborhood, just the street over. They set up a
Mm-hmm.
lot of stuff. Um,
Oh, yeah. My neighborhood
Thankfully,
Fourth of
over the
July is just
pandemic, it was
a war
it
zone.
was well, not as bad as before the pandemic. But I think obviously it wasn't so bad last year. It didn't seem to be as bad because like
It was pretty
there was a
bad
big
last year here.
explosion of it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, I think it's actually more just like it was. Oh no, my thinking was that it's frequent in June. Once it's after 4th of July, though, it is more just about like maybe just on the weekend or just
Yeah.
around holidays, like Labor Day.
Yeah.
Then it will. It's not every fucking night or every
That's
other
true.
night. I know. Yeah,
Unless you're my neighbors who
mm,
seem to
just want
intentionally
them.
wait till 3 in the morning, Sunday night,
I
because they're
have.
off. Because I assume the
Yeah,
kids are in high
I
school
had a
still,
base.
so like they're off, so they don't care. But yeah,
Well, this is where you either like if they're really not amenable to like talking about like, hey, you're really disturbing the peace. And I had this like, well, we were planning out in our heads, but me and my more tougher roommate at the time who was using this room,
mm-hmm.
and we had neighbors just on the other end of the block doing fireworks. At least that's where it sounded like it was from. So we were like planning out like if they're gonna keep doing this all week or after this week, we're going to go out and threaten them because if that's what it takes,
Yeah,
or talk to them, and if they basically say "fuck off," we'll threaten them. We didn't come to that. I think they did stop eventually. And that's kind of where that's probably everyone's. Well, my mindset is that eventually, it's just you got to bear it for a week or two.
yeah,
And I think it was when fireworks first started to be sold because we had a fireworks ban in the county, and then it was lifted. And of course, it's like I think it's all a big mistake because, like, even though people can bring fireworks in from other counties or the state, I think making them legally sold in our supermarkets, where like there's a fucking display in every store,
Uh-huh.
that has made it a problem.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering why there hasn't been like a reactionary push to re-ban them.
Yeah.
Not like a constitutional right, but it's like, are the people who are enjoying the fireworks going to show up to block the vote? No.
No.
Uh,
No.
they don't have any civic mindedness. Otherwise, they'd actually go out, to art to
Yeah.
do it.
I suppose
Um,
you might have like Chamber of Commerce types
who
just
lobby for it? Yeah, yeah.
who
It's a
lobby for
business.
it because
It is a business
it's a
interest.
big boon
They
for
were probably
business.
lobbying for it all the while, and there
Yeah.
wasn't a fuss to block it, which is why,
Right.
like, if we had all known, if all us fuddy duddy middle class people had known that, but it isn't just a working class versus middle class thing. Lots of middle class people are, college students or whatever. They're rich.
Mhm.
They're doing all just as much fireworks.
Yep.
It's on every other block, and it basically
Yeah.
it hurts the animals. It hurts the elderly. It hurts people who have a work schedule. Um,
Yeah.
it's
Hurts my neighbor who is
yeah,
autistic and has a sensory issue.
it's
And
literally yeah. It's one of the it's definitely one of the reasons my autistic roommate had to get the fuck out of here.
hmm
Um, that was even before it started, I think, but it was just illegal fireworks. But yeah, whatever. And the fire department hates it all to get out.
Oh, of course. Yeah. It starts tons of fires.
Okay, sorry.
No problem.
Okay, inaction. So here's a we can really learn from. I mean, cause of disunity, inaction. A political org must produce something. When people are inactive, they become disconnected or discontented. Petty jealousies and intrigue replace constructive activity. So that sounds like the online left.
Yeah.
You're not imagining it.
No. No.
Not only is there inaction on the
Seen plenty.
form of not producing anything, but there's an action on the form of not even having a political organization. So, and that's what I ran about the most.
For sure.
Lack of confidence. The morale of the organization may sag at times, but as long as there is confidence in the leadership, it can be built up. And the leadership is lost. However, the organization usually disintegrates. Now, here's where I could rant about whether or not people need to answer the question, or we need to have discussions about, do people want strong leadership, or are they so thoroughly convinced that we don't need leadership, or that leadership is bad because that's authority? Um, I think there need to be conversations about this, and we need some kind of consensus on we're okay with having leadership. Or if we're not, then we have to take a completely decentralized approach, and that way ideology is really important then. Um, like having the same ideology if we're not going to have united leadership. Um, it seems like people can't have one. We don't have either, and so we have nothing. And the last, which also kind of overlaps with activism to me, professional dissidence. The political leader must contend with the problem of the professional dissident, the person who is never happy in any organization. He is a constant griper, spreading seeds of discontent. Now, I think over the decades, we have many, lefty or pseudo lefty people. I mean, this is an observation, not scientifically backed. They're not happy in any organization, or they're like I've ranted before about people being afraid to join an org because they either lack a confidence, because maybe there is no leadership, there's no identifiable leadership, so there's nothing to have confidence in. There's no shared ideology to connect people into an org, because orgs have been depoliticized. So even if you do have an ideology, or even just the pure ideology of I don't have an ideology, I just happen to believe everything the capitalists want me to believe.
just so happens, yeah.
You're still then not going to be connected into an org, unless it's an apolitical one, I guess. What am I getting at? That, but everyone becomes the griper. Everyone becomes the complainer, the serial complainer, where no org can satisfy them. no work. Like that's what I get a sense of when I say quiz people or try to recruit people is like they just have this sense that like they won't be satisfied.
Right.
Either because we won't deliver enough wins or we don't produce anything as the left overall. Like people won't commit to being leftists because we don't have orgs, we don't commit, we don't have leadership to be confident in. We don't have leadership. The left disavowed having leaders because all our leaders were killed. It's like,
Yeah.
look,
Yeah.
if I'm
Yeah.
not a leader, I won't be assassinated.
Mm-hmm.
And this is the danger of like having leadership is that they get killed and then we don't have leaders or we're left with Al Sharpton. Um, or Jesse
Yeah.
Jackson, I guess. But see, that's Jesse Jackson's campaign in the '80s was kind of the last time there was a left leader
Mm-hmm.
on the national stage that wasn't Ralph Nader.
For sure.
But but Jesse, as a Democratic primary candidate, was like the last time you wouldn't get it again until Sanders, basically. Like that's Jackson was the Sanders of the '80s, and when his campaign failed because of slander and other kinds of bullshit, it just wasn't attempted again. It just wasn't, or it was with Nader, and he got probably the same percentage that Sanders would get in a general election with the duopoly doing his thing. Um, which is also why it's like, oh, he has to run as a Democrat because if he didn't, he would just be Nader, and I kind of believe that. Um, but that's just the way everyone's ideology works. They're not going to vote for Sanders even if he was an independent candidate. And that's why it's sort of a joke to hear these rumors about him running as an independent, a third party candidate. But not
Yeah.
third party, but this non-party candidate. I'm like,
No,
he's not going to do that because if he was, he would have done it last time. And
Yeah.
if he did, all of these so-called sock Dems would still vote for the Democrat because they don't want Trump to win.
Because it's blue number.
Because Trump will be the next
So,
candidate,
yeah.
or DeSantis, whatever. It would probably be Trump.
Oh,
All this talk about DeSantis or some other Republican, they're not going to really. It's still Trump that's really on everyone's mind
yeah. I hate to say it, but it's true.
as the one who's actually popular among Republicans.
Right.
Um, so it feels like everyone's a professional dissident because they're professional in not being a joiner or whatever. But why join something that doesn't have leadership, that doesn't have any wins? Um, which is why I always point. That's why I do the work of pointing out Greens have elected people to office. Many other groups have not. So we do have wins.
Sure
They're
enough.
just not
Yeah.
national wins.
Right. Yeah.
Caveat. But here are the forces contributing to unity. Well, there's not as many. Although many forces contribute to disunity, the political leader is aided by the fact that strong elements toward unity do exist. They are, if we can. But in a postmodern contest, and here's where postmodernism is maybe a good thing. Kind of eroded these things. Loyalty. Many persons have a deep and unabiding loyalty to a party, political faith, or leader. It motivates their interest in politics and is often strong enough to give everything they do a political orientation. So I think these days, and I'll include myself, we have loyalty to causes and maybe ideology, but not really. We have loyalty to a cause. Let's say the cause is climate change. But that is very vague. It's a loyalty to almost like abstract ideas, not a
Right.
physical, material thing.
Mm-hmm.
So we may have loyalty to our friends and family, but or our clan, and thus politics becomes tribalism and that kind of partisan and toxicity. And that's what most people mainstream writers will point out as being a problem. People are too tribalistic these days. They're in their camp. Fox News versus MSNBC. And I'm like, yeah, because they don't have loyalty to their country anymore. It's like, what does it mean to have loyalty to their country? But that's the thing. Support the troops. American exceptionalism. That's what people are kind of left with, without having an org or any loyalty to any leader or anything.
Right.
People don't trust the leaders, and people don't like leaders for this. All leaders are the same. Every politicians are all the same. But not Bernie Sanders. He's a good at it.
He's doing. I hate to say it, but we are
We're out of time.
over time. So how much is left in
Well, we
this
started
particular?
late, my friend.
I know, and that was my fault. I had a lot of
Let me just
running
finish this
around
up.
the.
So
Okay.
the last two is philosophy. We can trade that out with ideology, but political groups and parties are welded together by a similar basic philosophy. These underlying philosophies create unity. The last is satisfaction. Satisfaction derived from building a better org, working for better government, or achieving political power are some of the motivations that have a psychological payoff or reward. The attainment of these rewards by individuals helps hold the organization together. Now, obviously, if you have nothing but dissatisfaction because you just keep losing or you have setbacks, it is also, it has the opposite effect, which is odd because, when it comes to leftist organizing, it's like you're going to have an equal amount of victories and losses, like with the Amazon Union. They had some victories, but they're having, if you actually count them up, they're losing more than not.
Hmm.
The same goes for Starbucks and the other types of unions. We can tout that there's being progress being made, but if you count up the tally with all the votes, they've actually been likely losing more than not, just as the Greens lose more than we win.
Yeah.
But no one touts the Greens as being an up and coming movement. We got to do union organizing first, build base for jobs and incomes, I guess, and stability. So I'm on board with that logic too. So promoting unity. So I just want to finish that up. But a formula for success, threefold, is participation, recognition, and having a program. Have a program. Map out a constructive program of work to accomplish each year and assign responsibilities. Have an actual annual, for 1 year goal, 5 year goal, 10 year goal. Um, just like ML's one. But otherwise, that's it. Any closing thoughts?
It was, I appreciate the part of the chapter that went through on maintaining cohesion, maintaining a focus, because you're right, things do tend to just kind of fall apart if left leaderless and kind of directionless. So yeah, focusing in on making the party more than just something we do once every election cycle. I think that's good stuff for sure.
Yeah, it's totally necessary, and it's what's so frustrating about after the 2020 election is that everyone did not seem to be interested in any year-round work.
Right.
Everyone was just so exhausted, I guess,
They're
from
just like, oh, we finally beat the bully
the
back, and yeah,
nightmare of
that's it.
Trump, and
We
it's
can go
like,
back to sleep.
yeah, so many went back to sleep,
Yeah.
and you need a base amount of people to do the outreach to keep people awake, I guess, or to rouse or to hit the snooze, give no, the opposite of the snooze button, to be the alarm clock.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, people get exhausted when it's, I don't know. It's like people are split between the ability to be turned on year round, meaning all the time, and it's just part of their life,
Right.
just as much as getting the groceries, doing the laundry, and doing some canvassing. Um, it's not something that needs to be overwhelming if it's a little bit. If everyone does a
Yeah.
little
Exactly.
bit, it adds up. Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
that's the take I've taken to avoid burnout, and I still, even when I do a little bit of that I do, I still kind of take breaks of like the summer, basically or a month or two, or the winter, this a
Hmm.
year. I say I'm going to take a break, but really I just mean I'm not going to. I'm just going to cut the number of hours that I spent doing
Sure.
something.
Yeah.
Not like I can never stop completely because then I feel disconnected and I feel
Right.
worse.
I
Um,
think yeah, that self-regulation is important though, because yeah, for so many of us that keep on, we see how much there is to do and how few people are stepping up to take parts of that work. So there's the impulse to just take it all on
Yeah. But
ourselves.
you get what you give, and the more you do, or the
Mm-hmm.
more that is being done, the more it happens. And
True.
you get those immediate results with gardening or something, but
Right.
it doesn't seem as immediate when you're doing campaign work, but or party building or org building. But actually, you can. I'll make the case that like you can see results even as because you're just building relationships, and that's a result. It's better than being disconnected and alienated. And so that's why I'm just
For
tired
sure.
of memes. I'm tired of fucking depressed memes and complaining memes and memes that are just like pointing out problems and
Yeah.
just I'm done with it. Memes to laugh at, of course, but like if the meme is like not a joke, or it's a joke if you're depressed, or it's funny if it's like you hate everything, or if you're already jaded, it's funny.
Right.
And I'm not laughing.
Yeah. I hear you. Memes can serve an important purpose. It can build that community and, you know,
So
comment
check
and
out
reference point. But yeah.
just wrap up. Check out my show. I'm doing my last 2 hour program this Tuesday. I'm calling it The Beginning. Basically going to try to do some kind of wrap up on leftist strategy. I'm going to cover the fate of the Marxist Center. I'm going to cover system change as a middle ground between system acceptance and system denial.
Hmm.
Um, and a few other things. So yes, the last one was called The End. You'd think I would just be covering apocalyptic stories, but I
I
kind of,
like that graphic.
but
That's
I'm
pretty
not.
good.
Yeah, but I'm just not actually. It's just more. I was trying to connect a bunch of stories or articles that were just kind of describing like how we're doomed, or America is like
Mm.
it's problems. They're just like fascism is coming and
Yeah.
doing doomerists, but I just couldn't maintain that the whole 2 hours. And so some of the articles I cover in the second half are actually more about addressing doomerism and not being a doomer.
Oh, very
Um,
cool.
or rather, the intrinsic problems with the state of things. So I do carry that. What else can I say? Three Left Show is found at threelefts.news. I'm on Facebook particularly, but I am also on Twitter, Instagram, I think, and Mastodon.
Mastodon. That's
And there'll
one
be
of those
time for
ones
this
that.
another. Yeah, yeah. It was so funny. I won't get into it. But I wanted to
Okay.
plug also Resonate, which is a co-op that is a alternative to Spotify.
Oh,
That
okay.
uh, it instead of being free with ads, or even when you pay a subscription to Spotify, musicians still don't get money. They're not paid anything. Um, Instead, you pay a dime for every track you listen to. But if you listen to a track 9 times, you get to keep it because you pretty much paid almost $1 for it. And in this way, you can stream music in playlists and based on genre or what you like or hashtag. And so it works like Spotify, but musicians actually get paid something. And I also pay the $10 annual due to be a member of the co-op, which is not much at all. So, and I think I don't know. I have to check if the $10 is like also goes into my listening account, but I think it seems to be separate.
So you said
Um,
that was resonate. Is there some different
Resonate.
spelling of that?
No, it's not a funky spelling. You just need to do a search for Resonate Co-op,
Co-op.
and
Okay.
their logo is a dot with two arcs around it.
Ethical. Okay. Resonate.is.
Want to give a plug for that because I think these things need to
Very
be
cool.
propagated. Toot sweet.
Absolutely. I always like to
Mastodon
plug more of
maybe doesn't have all the functionality that Facebook has, and that's why it's not going to catch on. But
that. Yeah.
and I'm not using it regularly enough, so maybe I need to get
Yeah.
the app, and then I will.
I tried it for about a
Um,
minute and then kind of forgot about it. Yeah.
which is what happens the most anarchist or decentralized created alternatives. Um, they don't have an outreach and publicity team. And so you get like just counter propaganda where even like Chapo Matt Crispin made like a joke in conversation about like what do you get like when about Musk buying Twitter. It's like what are you going to do? Go to Mastodon? And it kind of sounds it's the same like jokey logic of like what are you going to do? Vote for a third party? What are you going to do? Not be capitalist? What are you going to do? Not get
Yeah.
uh, not be a conformist? Yeah. um,
Right.
Okay, so good
Well,
night,
cool.
everybody. Good night.
All right. Yeah.
Zach.
Thanks for
Um,
coming on once again.
yep.
I look forward to the next pamphlet in a couple weeks.
It will be the last one, and I will probably just tie it to my talk about consensus and facilitating meetings. I'll review the
Cool.
pamphlet to see
That's
if
that's
there's
critical
anything
stuff.
worth if there's anything worth discussing in the pamphlet. I will.
Hmm.
Maybe, but just, I'll try to be more of a summary of it,
Cool.
and just be more of a talk, since I have
Very good.
way more experience. And because otherwise, I'll just keep digressing into what I know about meetings.
Yeah.
I might as well make it official.
Yeah.
Okay.
Go on and on about that. All right. Thank you so much, and yeah, have a good night. See you next time.
Bye bye.
All right, that was Dan of the Three Lefts Show. Excellent podcast. Can't recommend it enough. The link is up in the chat there for you. Thank you for the sub, Amazing Wolf Skeptic. That's the reason you got your badge. That's for your, I think you're called a founder. That's what's coming up when I look at the actual Twitch thing. So you are a founding member and a 1 month subscriber. That's what you get your badge for. And of course you get the custom emojis for Bread Theory as well. So thank you all for joining tonight. Looks like we got one person on Twitch still, so I'll try to find a very low number channel to raid into. Dan Simpson, did he just start up? Oh, I'm just doing Rocket League? He must have just started. Let's raid to Dan Simpson because he raided me the other day. So, did he stop already? No, he did not. We will start that raid momentarily. Stick with me. Before I do that though, definitely should link in the chat the Dan Simpson show. Go check that out as well. Oh, he was. He didn't even mean to be streaming. So maybe we'll pick someone else. Indie Left News instead. Oh no, looks like he's just gonna go with it. All right. So thanks for joining. See you next time.